Good evening. Good evening, and I'm sorry for the late start. Welcome to the January 24th, 2019 school board meeting, and this meeting is now in session. Unfortunately, Monique O'Grady is ill today, and she will not be able to join us tonight. Please stand while our Career Center Air Force JROTC cadets present the colors. Thank you. Please be seated. Tonight, we will recognize the students who were selected to receive awards in the Arlington Public Schools Martin Luther King Jr. Visual and Literary Arts Contest. Ms. Dawn Smith from School and Community Relations will present the recognition. Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Chair Goldstein. I'm pleased to be here tonight to recognize the outstanding work for the Arlington Public Schools 2019 Dr. Martin Luther King Literary, Visual, and Literary Arts Contest winners. This year, Arlington Public Schools was proud to again partner with Arlington County for the annual tribute, Dr. King's Dream, A Legacy Performed. This marked the 50th year that the community has come together to celebrate Dr. King's legacy and his many contributions. This is an important event for APS because it highlights our students' contest winners and provides another way for APS students to learn about Dr. King and understand how his work has affected our lives. Each year, we sponsor an essay and visual arts contest, and this year we received over 1,100 entries with submissions from each of our schools. Students were asked to describe in writing or through visual art their dream for their community and how they will work to make their dream come true. Let's take a look at the video. The Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Literary and Visual Arts Contest allowed our APS students the opportunity to explore Dr. King's roots and life to make connections with their own life. Now let's listen to what they have to say.
I wrote about my brother because he has a speech delay. I want people to know about him, that he is special, and just because people don't understand him, that doesn't mean you can make fun of him. It just means that he's different and he can still have his ability to play and do things.
Martin Luther King's dream was kind of like mine. I want them to be brave and strong, and I want everyone not to criticize someone by their skin color, their gender, or whatever they are. Like, it's just not right.
I really like the line that I say, "So I fight," because it kind of shows that even though I have so many dreams, they're not going to be a reality unless if I actually do something. So.
Nowadays, we're finally kind of coming together as one, and it's better because the more the population gets bigger and stuff, the more we can adapt to it and just continue it and try to change it for a better place.
There was somebody in the painting that was painting. The idea kind of just popped in my head.
My visual project is, if I created the world, what would I make it look like? Like when life's hard, you gotta keep going and stay tough about it and be brave. Like Martin Luther King.
I think that we should continue to do these contests for people to just always remember that everyone should be treated equally and have all the rights other people have.
I even wrote a college essay about this. I think being at the Women's March it didn't just have to do with being a woman, it had to be to do with a community of people that are trying to change the current political climate, and it was, I was just kind of in the right spot at the right time to catch a photo where, they happened to be doing the Black Lives Matter movement symbol, which is the fist in the air. So I think that, first of all, tied in really well to, the message of Martin Luther King and kind of like the modern day civil rights movement. And the community aspect of that obviously was just the fact that there were thousands of people in front of me that stretched beyond the photo.
I have a dream, my poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
And that was just a snapshot of the amazing entries that we received. We thank all who participated, and we were truly moved by the quality and the creativity of all the student submissions. If you'd like to watch that video again, it will be airing on ATV. It will be on our Facebook and YouTube channels. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the school staff who are here tonight to support their students. Would you please stand? And we have many family members and friends of this year's honorees. Would all of the students' parents, friends, and family members please stand? Thank you for joining us tonight for the support that you provide every day to our students. Each honoree tonight will go home with a certificate of recognition from the school board, a monetary gift from Arlington Community Federal Credit Union in recognition of their achievement, and new this year, a set of contemporary books based on this year's theme, provided courtesy of the APS Department of Library Services. The credit union is one of our valued APS partners, and they support our schools throughout the year, not just for this program, but also in promoting student artwork at their branches and sponsoring branches in our schools and providing information about financial literacy. The representative, Hannah Dannenfelser, is she here? I didn't see her come in, and she didn't know if she would make it. Well, she couldn't be here tonight, but we thank her, as well as the Department of Library Service, for your continuing support of our students, and we do value your participation. And Jeff Luttrell is the Supervisor of Library Services. He's over there in the corner. Now I'm going to ask Chair Goldstein and Dr. Murphy to assist me with passing out the certificates. So I'll call each student up, and you'll receive your certificate, and then when you come up, please remain standing so we can all take a picture of you at the end. Our first one is going to be Alexandra Murphy. He's from McKinley Elementary School. And excuse me, he's our second place winner for the Literary Arts K through 2. Our first place winner, Valerie Wisniewski, could not be here with us tonight. Our third place winner is Elizabeth Genstow from Abingdon Elementary School. In grades 3 through 5, our first place winner was Maya Andri Malala. Our second place winner, Zoe Gardner, could not be here tonight, but our third place winner is Harper Rath from Long Branch. In grades 6 through 8, we have Laura Muhammad from Thomas Jefferson Middle School. And our second place winner is Marlena Nagel from HB Woodlawn. Our third place winner is Angeline Molina. And did she come in? She did. In grades 9 through 12, first place, Brianna Hernandez. Our second place winner is Takir George. And our third place winner is Daniel Brancati. And now to our visual arts winners. Our first place winner from Drew Model School is Madison Macbeth. Oh, I'm sorry. And our second place winner is Phoebe Basic. I don't think she's here. Phoebe's not feeling well, so she couldn't join us tonight. Our third place winner is Emma Ignat. And she's not here with us tonight either. Oh, but Dad is here. So we'll give you her stuff. In grades 3 through 5, our first place winner is Khalil Parrington from Patrick Henry. And our second place winner is Leah Wargo from Patrick Henry again. Leah. Third place is Hannah Allard from Nottingham. In grades 6 through 8, first place winner is Kyla LaRue. Second place is Vivian Monaco from Thomas Jefferson. And third place is Allison Graves from HB Woodlawn. In grades 9 through 12, first place is Jenna Alcorn. Second place is Naud Palos. And our third place winner is Raouf Marin. Yep, that's it. Who's taking the picture?
Got it?
So for the students who have not received their envelope and their set of books, please meet me in the hallway and I'll give you those. And thank you all for joining us to celebrate our student success this evening.
Thank you so much, Deb.
You're
It was
welcome.
a great event. Sure, please. Thank you again, and thank you to all of our talented students, and congratulations. Okay, we are moving on with the rest of our business. I'd like to invite folks to move out to the hall for further conversations. And we are now at the announcements phase of our meeting. On January 29th and January 31st, we will hold 2 work sessions with our ACI committees. These meetings will be at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom. And on Friday, February 1st, we will hold a committee of the whole meeting at 5:30 p.m. in the school board conference room. Board members, do you have items you would like to announce? Nancy.
I just wanted to mention that on Tuesday evening this week, on the 22nd, we had a work session on transportation. And I again have to thank our entire staff and the county staff and the county leadership. I think it was the first time we had a county board member participating at one of our work sessions as an active work session member. But it shows how strong a collaboration we have with the county on transportation. And I would encourage everyone to please, if you haven't had a chance to see that work session, to please take a look at it. And if you hear about a transportation discussion about to happen in your area, your neighborhoods, please get involved in it, because we will likely be making some changes next year to the way we bus our kids through the school system and encourage people to use multimodal methods. So please pay attention to that. I thought it was a great session. We covered a lot of material, and if you want to get a preview of the future, it's a good session to listen to.
Thank you. Yeah, Barbara?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Goldstein. First, speaking of the arts, I would like to share that last night, Mr. Goldstein, Dr. Murphy, and I had the chance to present awards to our APS level Reflections winners. It was a wonderful evening. We saw some of the same artists here this evening that received awards from Reflections last night. Those who received the level of outstanding interpretation are going on to a larger district level competition, and we want to wish them luck. Also want to wish luck to the Virginia Teacher of the Year, Rodney Robinson. He teaches in the city of Richmond, and he was named a finalist to the National Teacher of the Year competition, so we want to wish him luck in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya, do you have announcements?
Thank you. And congratulations to the CCPTA winners. I'm sorry I missed it. I was actually in Richmond attending the Capitol Conference for the Virginia School Board Association, and I just want to share with everybody that there's a lot of bills affecting the schools this year. That school safety, bills on behavior analysts, school counselors, a lot of bills on school safety, and bills on the school calendar. It was very interesting to learn about it. A lot happening in our General Assembly. So if that's something that's interests you, pay attention. A lot of bills have the potential of passing and could have effects on us next year. Very interesting conference, and I am sorry I missed CCPTA. It was scheduled last week, but due to the snowstorm, it got rescheduled to yesterday. And I did hear the announcement about the Teacher of the Year. Governor Ralph Northam let us know about that. He was very excited. There's 4 finalists in the country, and the Virginia Teacher of the Year is one of the 4 finalists in the country. So I was very excited, so thank you for sharing that, Dr. Cannonen. And that's all, Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you. I'm going to share some announcements from a few of my liaison schools. At Kenmore Middle School Special Olympics fans raised over $2,000 for the first Polar Plunge held at the Mosaic District in Fairfax County. The Kenmore Cougars fundraising team raised $2,517 and exceeded their goal. And since the school met their goal, Principal Dave McBride took the plunge and jumped into a freezing cold pool of water. Fortunately, rescue divers were on hand and everyone successfully took the plunge, and photos are available on the Kenmore homepage. The funds raised support Special Olympics in Northern Virginia and will specifically help Kenmore with their whole school inclusion event later in the spring. The Kenmore Unified Basketball team then went on to win both tournament games over the weekend. Is Dave McBride here? No, he's probably home with a blanket around him, yeah. Excuse me, Campbell Elementary School finished up its community read of Wolf Hollow. 3rd through 5th graders and their families read this novel set in a rural Pennsylvania town during World War II, and completed projects ranging from research into the role of telephone operators to making hickory nut pie. Last night, they shared their reflections and projects at a community book club meeting. Families were provided the book with Title I funds in English or Spanish to read at home or in school. And at Oak Ridge Elementary School, on January 22nd, that's yesterday, the Wellness Council at Oak Ridge started hosting a Wellness Month from January 22nd through February 15th for any staff members interested. Each person will have 3 goals to keep track of: mindfulness, fitness, and nutrition/hydration. These goals are posted on a bulletin board so staff can share what they are working towards, and there's some accountability. And a student wellness program is beginning February 1st. So congratulations to all of those schools, and we will now hear Dr. Murphy's announcements and updates.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. So from polar plunges to attending CCPTA reflection contests to Martin Luther King celebrations to being here when we bring on new employees and just doing everything else under the sun, we are celebrating our principals this week with Principal Appreciation Week, and this is throughout the state. So I know we mentioned earlier that we had some principals here. We still do have some of those folks here, and we just really want to say thank you to all of them for the work they do with their school communities. It truly is a 24/7 responsibility, and it's something I believe all of our principals do very, very well. So we want to recognize and thank them, and if you see them with the remainder of this week or into the remainder of the school year, just a note of appreciation to them. I know they will very much appreciate those comments. So I want to update everyone also where we are with our secondary option and transfer application. And we're going to be holding that lottery on Tuesday, January the 29th, right here at the Welcome Center. Once we have conducted the lottery, written notifications are going to be sent to all families by February the 5th. And then families need to confirm or decline by the 22nd of February. As changes occur, we will also maintain the secondary wait list to fill available slots until May the 1st. And there is a little bit of what happens, folks decline, and then wherever you are on the waiting list, we'll circle back. So just be patient as we move through that process. We are also going to begin the kindergarten and elementary application period, and that applications to apply for elementary transfers and options will start on February 1st, and it will continue through April the 15th. Of course, students can continue to register after that date, but those who wish to apply for option schools or transfers need to apply by the 15th, and more information is going to be made available next Monday, so stay tuned. We also have Kindergarten Information Night coming up on January the 28th. And that will be at Washington Lee from 7 to 9. We do have an inclement weather date, if needed, for February the 4th. And if you know someone in your neighborhood who will have kindergarten-age children, encourage them to come out to the evening's event. We usually have a pretty nice turnout, and we encourage families to come out and also meet some of our principals who will be there at that event. Well, tomorrow ends the second grading quarter, or the end of the first semester. There is a holiday for students, which is a grade prep day for our staff on January the 28th. And then secondary report cards will be going out on the 6th, and elementaries near the middle of the month on the 15th. And my encouragement through most of this, even though we've had a little bit of a disjointed schedule because of inclement weather and scheduled holidays, is to make sure that students get all their assignments in, and I know our principals have been encouraging that with the support of our teachers. So just a big thank you to our teachers for their flexibility as we've wound down here to the end of the second grading period. We want to announce also the 60th anniversary commemoration event of the integration of Stratford Junior High School. That's going to be held at Dorothy Ham Middle School on Vacation Lane there on Monday, February the 4th, and this is going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. in the evening. Our very own chair, Mr. Reed Goldstein, will be there, along with the chair, Christian Dorsey. And so there will be a host of events. I know when I came on board, they were just coming off the 50th anniversary celebration, and I think this is something that Arlington is very, very proud of. And so it looks to be a very worthwhile and enjoyable evening, and we encourage folks to come out for that. We're also going to be celebrating National School Counseling Week on February the 4th through the 8th, and so we also appreciate and recognize our counselors for the role they play in supporting our students not only academically but socially and emotionally. So thank you, counselors, for what you do each and every day. So we've had a lot of discussion recently about some of our inclement weather events, and I know after the November 15th event, we received a lot of input and feedback, and one of those pieces was that families wanted to have as much advance notice as they could when we were going to either delay or, in fact, close schools. So we've held pretty true to that as a practice after the November inclement weather event. And so I just want to remind everyone of what our process will be in trying to inform folks the evening before about either a delay or a closure. If we go with a delay, we will be coming back by 6 a.m. the following morning and letting folks know if we are going to stand pat with the delay or, in fact, if we are going to close schools. A lot of the feedback from folks has been we very much appreciate the advance warning. Now, I just need a little bit of forgiveness, similar to what we extend to the weathermen or weather people, in the sense of when we have a storm that's close, it may turn out that the storm does not, in fact, cause an inclement weather event. But we've already made a decision, and families have told us this is very helpful for them in planning for the morning and making sure that they're not rushed in the event that we do have to delay or we do have to close. So we'll continue with that pattern. Please make sure you share that with friends and family so that if folks do not have that awareness or are not listening this evening, that they know what our practice is moving forward. And I do have to say I have received many compliments today, most recently, from our students who say they appreciate the fact that evidently there was a great deal of anxiety waking up throughout the night, looking out the windows, deciding whether we were going to have school or not, that they in fact know that we're moving forward in whatever direction we're moving forward. So that's helpful to know as well. All right, we're going to move to School Board Action Plan, and we're going to be covering the 4 areas of policies, operations, new schools and programs, and capital initiatives. And I'm going to get a little bit of assistance this evening from 2 of our assistant superintendents, Dr. Tara Natras and Dr. John Chadwick, when we clip in on one of these particular topics. So the first is new policies and policy revisions, and as you can see, the board has a pretty aggressive agenda with many of our policies that we will be adopting, and also you can see that we are aggressively moving through the queue here of those that we have slated for this year. There are several that are on consent agenda this evening, but I know that there have also been some questions, and we've got a work session actually coming up, in particular in addressing several of our policies that have to do with equity, inclusion, and transgender. So I'm going to ask Dr. Natras if she would share a little bit in the next slide that I have as far as what some of these timelines are around this, what that work session is going to be designed, and then how we're going to be able to move through and finalize these before the end of the school year.
Sure. So these 3 equity policies are really gearing up for either initial work or to finalize over the next couple of months. You will see that for the equity, inclusion, and transgender policies, that all of them should be finalized by May and June of 2019. You can see that the process for each one of them are pretty similar. Our equity and inclusion are both new policies. The transgender policy, we are looking at a potential update of policy J2, which is the Student Equal Educational Opportunities Non-Discrimination Policy, and we're also going to develop the policy implementation procedures for that particular policy to really focus on the needs of our transgender students. So you can see for the equity policy, there's been quite a bit of work that has been done. There is a draft of that policy that has been developed with the policy review team. The school board policy subcommittee has reviewed that. And there has been an alignment of the equity policy with other APS policies. So moving forward, in February, there will be another review by the School Board Policy Subcommittee, and the school board work session that Dr. Murphy referenced will be held on February 26th. We'll actually discuss all three of these policies at that work session because there is a parallel structure for equity and inclusion. With the inclusion policy, we have done some work over the summer and are really just gearing up with that one in January and February, where we will be drafting the policy and aligning it as we did the equity policy to the other policies within APS that address inclusion. It will be talked about at the school board work session, and then we go through the school board policy subcommittee. We review the policy with advisory groups, the executive leadership team, and principals, which is our process for all of our policies in April and May of 2019, and then that will come forward for school board information and action. The transgender policy, we're really going to be spending a lot of time focused on the policy implementation procedures because that's where the specifics of that work will really occur. And so we will be drafting that policy over the month of February. In March, we will review that with the policy review team. And then March, April, we'll work with the advisory groups, ELT, and principals. We'll make any revisions. And then that one will come forward. We haven't yet determined whether or not there will actually be any revisions to policy J2 or it will just be the policy implementation procedures. Either way, we'll bring it forward. If it's the PIP, it'll be for monitoring. If we make any recommended changes to the policy, that would be information and action in June.
Good. Thank you very much, Dr. Natras, for giving a little bit more detail behind that, but I think this really gears us up for that February work session. All right, the next topic is operational planning, and two items under the strategic plan. As we continue to bring monitoring items to the board, we will update the board as far as in relationship to the specific topic of the monitoring item, how there may be a performance objective or performance objectives that are connected with the strategic plan. In addition to that, I will be bringing to you very shortly a 90-day update of the strategic plan as far as where we are, somewhat similar to the presentation I'm doing here with my announcements. So look for those two items to be forthcoming. As you know, we've taken action on a number of school naming recommendations with the new middle school, the Montessori program, the building at the Heights, and the renaming of W&L, and the board took action on the Drew naming committee. I do want to share some additional information because I know the board had some extended discussion at the last meeting around the Drew naming committee. This evening on your consent agenda, there is an additional member being named from Abington. So that is, I think, going to round out the group. And I also know there was quite a bit of discussion around a charge or some guidance or some direction as a result of the committee meeting this past Tuesday. So I do want to share with the board and the community that I attended that meeting on Tuesday evening, and I attended as the superintendent of schools. And I want to represent to the group that I believe the intent of the naming committee coming together as originally designed was first to really recognize that the neighborhood surrounding the school was going to expand, and that was a result of the elementary boundary changes. Connected with that, also, I think it was recognized that the culture of the school was going to be shifting. New folks were going to be coming into the school. They needed to begin to make that connection. And the school and the principal needed to begin to create a culture around the community coming together. So I think in the sense of initiating the renaming committee, I think it was the correct move to make. But coupled with that, I communicated to the group that it was really never the intent, or I did not believe it was ever the intent for the committee to rename the school. Charles Drew is a very prominent member of the Arlington community. He has a long-standing reputation in all of Arlington. And so I don't believe the intent was ever to change the name of the school. However, the school did have an instructional focus design around it being deemed a model school, or Drew Model School. And I think that name was attached to it many, many years ago. And so that does not really necessarily going to represent what the future of the school was going to look like. And so it may not really represent the identity that the school has today. And then finally, my guidance to them was similar to the guidance that we've had with the naming of some schools recently, most significantly Dorothy Ham Middle School and Alice West Fleet Elementary School. Those are neighborhood schools to stay to the naming criteria or design with their thinking as far as moving forward. And in the void of not having any particular guidance, I thought it was helpful for me to speak to the group. I do appreciate Ms. Kim Graves allowing me the time to go down and talk with them. And I think that'll be very helpful when the group comes back, the committee comes back with the board for recommendations. So that's kind of where we are, a little bit of an update with that. Finally, we've got the instructional program pathways, pre-K through 12. And we have a February 12th school board work session slated. You're going to hear some monitoring items a little bit later that are going to speak to that, and this is kind of a linchpin and something that we're going to be paying close attention to with many of the decisions I know that are going to be coming forward to the board. As far as new schools and program moves, I highlighted some of those deadlines coming up, most significantly the event with Kindergarten Information Night coming up on the 28th. And then with capital initiatives, we're going to go into a little bit more depth here, but with the Ed Center, we are looking at approval of the schematic design on February 2019, and with the Career Center, we've got slated construction to add seats to Arlington Tech, and that's going to be taking place over this summer as well. So let me turn to Mr. Chadwick. We like to keep folks updated on where we are with several of the projects that are slated to open this fall 2019. And I was wondering, Mr. Chadwick, if you could speak to these in a little bit more depth at this point in time.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Yes. Fleet Elementary School, and any of you who have driven by will see that it's getting close to being fully enclosed. The wood roof that you see is in fact the roof to the gym. It's a heavy timber construction, so it will never need to be refinished. And completing that on time is looking very positive. The parking garage is really complete, and we've collaborated with the County Inspection Services Division to use the upper level of the parking structure for contractor parking so that we no longer need to lease off-site parking, which is saving the school board money. Dorothy Ham Middle School, which started later than the other two projects because it was a smaller project, has suffered, as I mentioned last time, from the wettest year on record. And unfortunately, that's continued into 2019 with a heavy snowfall and then even more rain today. So we are working very hard with the contractor to recover as much time as possible. And we're working with the new principal, Ellen Smith, to accommodate the students within the existing school when it opens in September, within the existing school building when the new school opens in September, if the addition is not ready on time. The Heights building, I'm having to get used to that name, is growing day by day. It is completely topped out, and it is almost completely enclosed. If you go by there, you will see that many of the floors are actually completely enclosed. They have temporary heat, and a lot of the building systems are going in, along with walls and even some drywall. Henry and Drew elementary refreshes, we are working on those to put together the exact scope of work. We also have been doing some innovative work by ordering or bidding all of the furniture for all 5 schools at the same time to ensure that we get the absolute best prices for the school division.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. I just also want to remind everyone, I know those particular school communities are very aware of how things are progressing, but if you go to our website and then go to the A to Z index and then select design and construction, that will bring you to this particular page that's highlighted here, and then you can go and see in more detail photographs and progress being made, and also look at timelines. So we'll continue to keep those things updated, and thank you to Mr. Chadwick and his team, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of cooperation from the weather here. As always, we are continuing to feed the Engage website with information. One of the things we've added most recently, or going to be adding, we had a transportation work session the other evening, and we're going to be providing that information. There is a Transportation 101 that families may want to learn or know a little bit more about, and so we're going to be having transportation discussions as we move into the latter part of the winter and first part of the spring. But you can get questions asked. There's a lot of resources there, and we will continue to bring updates there when with particular topics. So I will stop there, Mr. Goldstein. That's a wealth of information. I don't know if board members have particular questions or issues that they'd like to raise or add to.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murphy. Board members, do you have questions for Dr. Murphy? Nancy.
Thank you. Dr. Murphy, I have 3 questions. There are 3 different topics, and I'm going to go in the order that you did them in. The secondary school options and transfer, and the opportunities to apply to both option schools and neighborhood schools. I know there was a great deal of consternation in the community, particularly around Gunston, Jefferson, and Kenmore, which had been receiving a good number of transfers. And I, as you know, I'm a real proponent of that and wish that we could do more of it. Would love to even see relocatables there, but I know that we're, for some reason, adverse to that. But that said, I know that we discussed, and I believe we agreed, that if, even though some of those schools at this point doesn't look at this point like they can take transfers, we are allowing a waiting list. And
So
I want to confirm that.
Right, and I'm going to turn to Ms. Stengel to address that. Did you hear the question?
Yeah, we're taking waiting lists, and the waiting list will be maintained until May 1.
But I read the release. It's really buried, and the first statement that said is there are no transfers to these 3 schools. So I wanted to say it publicly that you can be on a waiting list, but right now there are no spots, and therefore it's it's possible, but it's may not be likely, and you would know by the end of the school year, as you're saying. But you can put your name in. It's just you would be on a waiting list.
Right. We actually had a lot more applications for the grades, that the students who wanted to stay who were impacted by the boundary changes. So the priority, there will be a wait list, and they'll work through the priority of the students based on first, are they returning for grade 8, returning for grade 7, and then if there's available space, they'll look and see if there's anything.
It's just not that clear that even if you aren't one of those categories, you could still put your name in. So I just wanted to make clear here that, yes, you can put your name in if you choose to, even if you are zoned to another school and aren't in that those waiting categories.
But I will just add, as a general practice, because some families don't know if they would even consider an option program, they're on the fence, I would encourage them to apply. I know this is different for middle schools, but you still, apply, put an application in, you still hold the cards to make the final decision.
Exactly. That's what I've encouraged
Yep.
people, and they've asked me about it. So in the next one, the topic is the policies. Thank you very much for that update on the policies that are particularly the inclusion, equity, and transgender. I've gotten a lot of questions about those, and I'm very excited to see that timeline. I would really love to see that at every board meeting. I've been chomping at the bit to get at the substantive policy part of our work. We've gotten through a lot of the operational part with the boundaries and name changes and things, and this is, as much as the budget, this is our bread and butter, and I'm very excited to get to these because they're transformative policies and really support where we're going as a system and support the new strategic plan. So I would love to see this regularly. This shows a lot of work that's been done and is going to be done. So if we could see that regularly, sure. And I'm going to make the plea that I always make, and that is to please involve the community early. Because let's say at the work session, it would be great if there had been a mechanism for community input. Maybe there needs to be an engage page where people can write in their thoughts to begin to capture that, because the sooner you get that, we're going to get it. So I think we've been great at funneling that input into staff so it can be incorporated before it even comes to the board. But as soon as this becomes, people key in on a board work session, they're going to start to come to us with their points. So I would love for the staff to hear it directly. So if we can figure out some way to do that. I see that there's an opportunity for advisory group input, but I would find a mechanism, because we've gotten really good at that, for input sooner, if that is something you could consider doing.
I think a lot of these elements exist already on the Engage website, so this one may be something that we would add, for sure.
Great, that would be wonderful. And the last is on the Drew naming. I went back and watched that in the last meeting. I was very tired at that point, so I needed to kind of refresh myself about what had happened. And to me, there were two outstanding pieces in that, and one was the inclusion of a member from Abingdon, and I know that we'll be taking action on that, so I was really pleased to see that we had moved ahead on that. And then also fulfilling what's in the PIP about giving the group some kind of information, guidance, charge. There is no formal charge, but you went and did that, incorporating feedback both from that meeting and in conversations afterwards from the board. So I just really want to thank you, because that tied up a lot of loose ends, and I really appreciated it, because I think watching it was a little bit confusing. But I think I looked at the PIP, we did it all, we did what we said we were going to do in the policy, and I hope some of that background. I learned a lot listening to the background of the whole model school that Linda Erdos had provided, and it was useful, and it made me read more about Charles Drew, and so thank you for going and tying up that process to this point.
To this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Murphy. We have an extensive list of capital initiatives, of course, and we have one project that kind of rolls along, so I think we don't have it listed as an initiative, and that is the Career Center and the continual need to accommodate the growing Arlington Tech program. And I wondered, I don't know that, I don't want to ask for a detailed description this evening on the spot, but I think we do need to follow along with what's happening each year as Arlington Tech expands. My assumption is that I guess, let me ask, do we have a plan to continue to modify the space, for example, over the summer in order to accommodate a larger Arlington Tech? And if we do, I hope that we can get some information to monitor that as we go forward this spring and get a little more information about it.
So why don't we do this, and maybe I didn't give this justice because there's a wealth of information here. We do have at the bottom of this slide slated the construction of seats at Arlington Tech. I may not have highlighted that, but what we can do, similar to this slide here and then also here on the webpage, is at the next meeting I can Mr. Chadwick and I can be a little bit more prepared and provide a little bit more depth and give you a little bit more forecast.
Some picture illustrations of the
Yeah.
actual plans, for accommodating additional seats there. That'd be terrific. Thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Van Doren, and thank you, Dr. Cannon, because I appreciated those questions. It was very helpful to me as well. And I actually wanted to ask about the Dorothyham Middle School. I understand it was hindered by record-setting rain. Are we going to have any issues opening up the addition on time? And I know because of that project, we already have existing seats. So I don't anticipate it. I'm making an assumption, but I would like clarification from you. I don't anticipate that we won't be able to start Dorothyham Middle School on time, but will the addition be ready to move in as well, just so that the board is prepared and the community is prepared to understand? Because I know in construction, when you get rain the way we did, if you don't have certain parts of that construction up, it can have significant delays, and I just didn't know if we have any information. If we don't know yet, that's okay as well, but I just...
Sure, so let me paint a little bit of a thumbnail sketch here for you. And some of these projects I'm only hearing about secondhand. This is historically, and some of these projects I actually did experience. But with some of the schools that we've opened or renovated on opening day, which is the first day of school, they have been partial, and that was true in the case of Discovery. I believe that was also true in the case of Thomas Jefferson Middle School. Those are the two that stand out. So you may not have 100% utilization of the building. You may not be able to access the gym or particular areas, and those may come on later in the school year, typically in the fall, the first part of the fall, because they're just tidying things up. I think for all of these projects, because of the scale that we have for projects this year, we are developing what we are saying are alternative plans or Plan Bs or backup plans in the event that we have partials. I would say, and Mr. Chadwick can feel comfortable with this, I think for the Fleet and the Heights facilities, we are in good shape with timeline right now, as of this moment, at 8:04:51.
Right.
Okay?
Preparing any flooding tonight.
Yes, exactly.
And wind knocking
I have
things
no
down
idea what we will
weather outside
discover
is not
tomorrow in the ground or how much more it will continue to rain. But right now, I think those projects are in good shape.
Okay.
For the middle school project, I think that was started later. Obviously, it's not as large a project as Mr. Chadwick alluded to. The other thing is that there has been a lot of moisture, either with snow or with rain, that has happened. And so we are working with Ellen Smith, and there is a Plan B or an alternative that we are shaping out. And then also coupled with that, the footprint of the existing building would be able to accommodate what the projected enrollment is. And then finally, for Henry and Drew, those are coming online. They're refreshes. We don't anticipate that they will cause much disruption. But we do have backup plans for all of these, and those are also in motion. So, Mr. Chadwick, I'll turn to you. I don't know if you want to correct anything I've said or modify it, or it's 8:06 now, so something could have changed.
I've been checking my telephone and my computer to see if there were any messages in the last 20 seconds, but no, there is no change when what you said is where we are today.
Thank you for the update. I really appreciate it, and I think it's helpful for us to know that we are prepared in an environment like we are in now, where we have this many construction projects and we have record-setting weather that has been hindering it. So thank you both.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick addition and alert people to our open office hours, which normally take place Monday evening when school is in session. However, this coming Monday, there's no school. It's a teacher work day, so we won't be having open office hours Monday evening. Instead, when Monday, there's no school on Monday. Open office hours shifts to Tuesday morning at 8:30. We've had a couple of hiccups in the last couple of weeks because of the weather and some Monday holidays, and the weather's forced us to, I think, cancel open office hours one Tuesday morning and shift it. I think this last week we shifted it to Wednesday morning. But I just wanted to alert everybody that open office hours this coming week will be Tuesday, January 29th, and I believe Tanya will be the board member there. So just to clarify.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you have another, yep.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
pause for a moment and be mindful that we just reviewed 6 significant capital projects that are on time in a very congested, expensive, complicated community at a time when we're growing leaps and bounds. And we have a lot on our plate. We did boundary changes. But the fact that as we keep going, this is all happening is really amazing. And I sat through the BLPC meeting for the Ed Center, which is another project that's not even up there. And I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you and recognize the staff that's getting that done, because they're quiet, they get it done, and this is amazing because this is not the experience of a lot of building projects in Arlington. So I just wanted to take a minute and say thank you to them.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out and for the thanks, and I'll add my thanks to that. And also, we should note that the highest risk parts of this extremely ambitious plan to open 5 schools, the highest risk part has already passed, and that is, the initial construction. Almost all of these have shifted to, the work has shifted to the interior. So we are, of course, it's January, and, we need these in September, and it's still a long time, but we are marching. We're marching in that direction. Well, so thank you, and thank you all for that. And now we are at the consent. Anybody else have any? We are at the consent portion of the agenda. May I have a motion, please, to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the motion passes 4-0. And I would like to announce a few things that we have just adopted as part of the consent agenda. So the board has taken the following actions. We adopted revisions to School Board Policy I-10.3.2, Student Services, to better align the policy with our practices. We also voted to delete School Board Policy M-14, Support, because the guidance in that policy is covered in Policy A-5, named APS Priorities. We also just approved the transfer of funds from funds for refresh projects at Drew Model and Henry Elementary Schools, so that needed work at those schools can be completed by September of this year. And in addition, the board approved the preliminary budget of $2.1 million for renovation of the transportation staff facility. But last but not least, I am delighted to announce that under consent, the board has appointed Mr. Eustace Stapler, Director of Counseling at Williamsburg Middle School. Is Mr. Stapler here? Mr. Stapler has experience in both middle and high school and has worked as a school counselor in Fairfax County since 2008. He has also served as a student services team leader. An experienced, licensed professional counselor, Mr. Stapler works with students holistically, helping them create and meet short-term academic goals, as well as helping them pursue post-secondary education opportunities. He has built strong relationships with families and staff, and he embraces diversity through collaboration with the administration to provide equitable education opportunities to all. Mr. Stapler has demonstrated excellent leadership qualities throughout his career that will serve him well as the Director of Counseling at Williamsburg Middle School. Congratulations, Mr. Stapler. Delighted to have you on board. And do you have people who have come along to help you celebrate?
Yes, I do. I brought my wife, Erica, and my daughter, who's holding on mightily, Audrey.
Excellent. Excellent. Welcome to you all. Congratulations. Thank you very much for being here this evening. And next, we will hear citizen comment on non-agenda items.
Mr. Goldstein, before we move to that, could I just make a comment on our consent agenda?
Surely.
Yep, I just wanted to remind everyone that the policies and the funding for the projects were heard at our last board meeting under information. So if you want to learn more about the actions we took today, please visit our website and watch our meeting from from January 10th, because we did hear them for information, and we did put them on consent agenda tonight. And I also wanted to just mention that we were able to approve a grant for Randolph Elementary from Arlington Community Foundation. It's a wonderful local organization, and they're supporting Randolph and the community. It's very exciting stuff that Randolph's going to do with the grant. So thank you, Mr. Goldstein, for letting me interrupt, and I will now turn the mic off.
Thank you for that explanation and clarification. And now we will hear citizen comment on non-agenda items, and before we begin, I will review our speaker guidelines. The school board welcomes public comment and allows comment at most regular board meetings. If you have not signed up online but would like to speak, you must submit a speaker slip to the clerk before the agenda item you wish to speak on is called. That means if you are speaking on the non-agenda portion of the non-agenda item portion of tonight's agenda, you need to get that slip in right now. Speakers are called in the order in which they sign up. Each speaker may speak for up to 2 minutes, and there's a timer to help you keep track of your time. The timer begins when the speaker starts speaking. Speakers should conclude their remarks when the buzzer sounds. All comments should address a matter related to Arlington Public Schools. Speakers should be courteous and address their comments to the entire school board. Generally, school board members do not respond to public comments at meetings. If you have written comments, please give them to the clerk to distribute to the board. And we ask the audience to refrain from applauding, as that takes time away from our speakers. We are also in the process of re-looking at and revising our speaker guidelines. And until that is completed, that effort is completed, for speakers who are coming to the podium and speaking to us in a language other than English, there will be an opportunity for an interpreter to translate for a total of 4 minutes for both speaker and translator. If in some cases the speaker has to speak only a couple of sentences and then the interpreter, of course, translates. And in other cases where there are already written comments, the speaker usually goes on for their 2 minutes, and the interpreter would then take those written comments and translate. But again, we're trying to work this into a revision of our public comment guidelines, and that should be available in the near future. So, having said all that, would you like to, do we have speakers?
So we have 2 speakers tonight. First speaker is Laura Hampton.
Thank you. I am standing here tonight as one of the 50 or so parents that received your letters to the parents of the Child Development Center at Fort Myers in response to the redistricting. So on behalf of many of them, and including myself, it wasn't very good. Specifically, the decision on not allowing the children that are at Long Branch to be grandfathered in for those that are not in 4th grade. Throughout this process, you guys were great at working with the other communities in the years that you spent with the Patrick Henry community and doing the community walks. but mistakes were made with the Child Development Center. It was really late in the game for us to understand what was going on. We didn't have T-shirts. We didn't know how to do this at the meetings. And you didn't know who we were and what the composition of the civilian and the uniformed makeup of the Child Development Center, what that installation means to us employees at the Pentagon and the other military installations. And the decision that was made to retain those kids that currently go to Patrick Henry, move to Fleet, that was great. On behalf of all those parents that aren't here tonight, that was fantastic. There's about 20 of us left that have kids that go to Long Branch. And there's no compelling reason to make those kids move in the next 2 years. The Long Branch decision will be revisited in 2020. There is capacity at that school to retain our kids. It floors me a little bit to listen to the conversation about the transfer policy and that there might be transfer options when we have 20 kids that for reasons because parents are PCSing, reasons because those parents actually live in the neighborhood but rely on the Cody Development Center for our professional reasons, or just because our kids are going to graduate out in the next 2 or 3 years. Please relook your grandfathering policy. You say that you support the troops, everybody does. This is how we need your support. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in, Laura.
Next speaker is Josh Fold.
Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Murphy. Happy New Year. I stand here today as a parent of an APS student to do something that is rare. I'm going to praise the communication and planning of the recent 2-hour delays and closures. I know that senior staff took a risk in changing the PIP on how and when to call for schedule adjustments, but as a parent, I am grateful that it was done. It is much easier to plan knowing the night before what is going to happen and how it will affect my childcare. Sure, there will be complaints, but on the social media I follow, the positive response rate was near 95%, with the dissent comparing Arlington to flatter, snowier locations, to which I will be more than happy to have an infrastructure conversation with those people. In addition, not to belabor the point, I was asked to share on behalf of the Arlington Education Association. Thank you for listening to the concerns of AEA members and accommodating their requests for more advance warning. It was well noted and was well received. And as Dr. Murphy said earlier about students liking to know, I think the human condition likes to know and be able to plan for what is going to happen, and last-minute surprises are never quite exciting. So thank you to APS for the closure communications, and keep up that great work.
Thank you for coming in, sharing your comments with us this evening, Josh. And now we are at the monitoring portion of the agenda, and we have one monitoring item tonight, the annual update. Dr. Murphy?
So, practice that we are putting in place that we did with many of these boundary changes recently is the board has asked for us to come to bring an annual update as far as where we are with capacity utilization, boundary adjustments, and options and transfers. So this evening, you're going to hear from Ms. Lisa Stengel, as well as members of her staff, in relationship to all of these items. And coupled with that, we will also be sharing with you projections and what those projections will be looking like here shortly. So, Ms. Stengel, I'm going to turn to you at this point to kind of kick this off. There's a number of things that we're going to be addressing as part of this presentation this evening, and so I thank you for bringing the information.
I think we need a change of presentation from the booth.
It should say Superintendent's Annual Update. And let me just give you a brief overview. This actually falls under the goal in the Strategic Plan for Operational Excellence. When the school board adopted the policy, the revised policy on options and transfers, it actually included language in there to come back to the school board each year to give an update on enrollment levels at each school and program and transportation. That's the monitoring report. you want me to keep going? I can keep going while we're waiting for it. So we're also supposed to bring recommendations to achieve the goals stated in the policy. Really what we're doing is looking at next year and making sure we're ready and prepared for the enrollment growth that we see coming. So tonight what we'll do is, before we jump into that, we wanted to give you a brief overview of our projections, which we're going to be posting next week. We have actually just updated that to include the new boundaries, and we'll continue to work on that in the spring update, because as we shifted those boundaries, we quickly sort of realigned it to the schools, but that information is getting tighter as we move to planning for the spring update that feeds next year's budget. And then, so Dr. Robert Ruiz is going to present the projections, and then Dr. Sarah Johnson is going to give the update that tells what we've done to plan for next year. And then I'll come back and share some next steps.
Should I just talk without the images?
No, I think it'd be best. I think it'd be best just to wait until we get this straightened out.
Somebody could hum the Jeopardy theme.
All right, I think you're ready to go.
Okay. Good evening. We rely on past trends to build assumptions for projecting enrollment into the future. Recent updates to the options and transfer policy and updates to the middle school and elementary school boundaries mean some of our enrollment trends are in flux. As a result, we've had to update the projections methodology. We've continued some of the best practices, such as cooperating with the county on birth and anticipated construction assumptions. We also continue to project the grades K to 12. I should note that we have a partnership with Teaching and Learning, where they do an estimate of pre-K enrollment 1 year ahead. So in this case, 2019-2020, which we append to every forecast year. So our projections, again, are just K to 12, and we depend on Teaching and Learning for pre-K. What's new in the projections methodology is that for schools with changes to attendance zones, we rely on trends of where students reside. So this impacts middle school and those schools at the elementary level that were impacted by the December 6 update to elementary boundaries. We also differentiate how cohort transition rates are calculated among schools and school levels. This new projection approach for option schools is different from approaches for neighborhood schools. And the student yield from new housing is cumulative year after year for each incoming class in grades K, 6, and 9. In the last projection round, we accounted for new construction, but we would only account for that student yield in the year in which the construction was anticipated to happen. One of the improvements that we made to our projections is that now that yield, that impact from new construction is modeled year after year. So if a building is built in 2019, for example, it's assumed that that building will continue yielding a similar number of students every year thereafter for the duration of the projection years. In addition, more stakeholders are assisting with key assumptions through an internal review committee, and we continue consulting a consultant on our projections methodology. This slide compares the current fall 2018 K-12 projections, which are the green bars, with last year's fall 2017 K-12 projections. Those are shown in the blue dashed line. You will notice that in our outer years, the new enrollment is slightly higher than had been projected last year. In the new projections, enrollment is anticipated to grow by 24% from 2018 to 2028. This is not unprecedented. For perspective, from fall 2008 to fall 2018, APS K-12 enrollment grew by 7,784 students, or 42%. At the elementary level, enrollment growth from 2008 to 2028 is expected to be around 21%, which is higher than last year's projection. So in terms of enrollment, we're projecting about 1,000 additional elementary students than we had projected last year. There are demographic and methodological reasons for the higher enrollment projections in the current projection rounds. Among the demographic reasons are growing birth. And births are important in the projections because 5 years later, they become entering APS kindergarten students. For context, birth grew from about 2,700 in 2007 to 3,100 in 2016. In our partnership with the county and them providing forecast of birth information, they're anticipating that by 2023, births will number around 3,750. So again, it's a growing trend. In addition, we rely on something called the birth to kindergarten ratio, which has experienced an uptick. The birth to kindergarten ratio, you can think of it as a capture rate for birth to Arlington parents and how many of those births eventually, on average, end up as or result in a enrolled kindergarten student in the system. Another reason for the uptick in enrollment is due to our development assumptions. This year, the county is providing us with a forecast of affordable units, which have a higher student generation rate. Again, in last year's projection, we counted on the county as well to provide us in forecast of future housing by year, but that affordable component wasn't there. It's there now. And so those committed affordable units tend, on average, to produce more children at all 3 school levels than other market rate units. So that's another improvement that we've made to the process. And again, we are also counting student yields from new construction on a cumulative basis. These assumptions have a bearing on every projection year, but especially starting in 2022. In 2022, it's the first year when we're relying on the assumptions from the county of future birth, in addition to all those assumptions that we're building in terms of new construction and the affordability impact and whatnot. At the middle school level, enrollment growth is expected to be 19%, which is slightly lower than last year's projection. At the high school level, enrollment growth is expected to be 35%, which is slightly lower than last year's projection as well. This table summarizes expected enrollment growth. The green column shows September 30th, 2018 actual enrollment by school level and total. The blue columns include the projection counts from 2019 to 2028, again by the 3 school levels and totals. And then the gold or yellow columns at the far right sort of show the change in terms of numerical values between 2018 and 2028, as well as the percentage change. And you see that in terms of enrollment numbers, the largest change that we're anticipating and we're projecting is at the elementary level with a growth of around 2,800 students. In terms of percentage change, from 2018 to 2028, it's at the high school level with a 35% growth. And again, system-wide, we're anticipating a growth of around 6,500 students, or 24% in that time period. So some key takeaways. The approach for fall 2018 projections reflect the continued collaboration with the county on housing and birth forecasts, changes to the options and transfer policy, the new elementary and middle school attendance zones beginning in 2019-20 school year. The updated methodology also incorporates all these policy and boundary changes to date. And we have greater internal review of our methodology and process with assistance from an internal review committee and consultant. With changing enrollment trends and a new methodology for projections, we see continued growth in K-12 enrollment with 24 increase expected by 2028. Slightly lower 10-year projections for middle and high schools enrollment in fall 2018 in comparison to the projections from last year in fall 2017. and higher growth at the elementary level in fall 2018 projections than previously seen, with an additional 1,000 more K-5 students anticipated. An increase of more than 1,000 K-5 students compared to the last projection round could have implications for the upcoming fiscal year 2029 CIP regarding the need and timing of future seats. I'll turn it over to Ms. Sarah Johnson.
Yeah, before we move on to the annual, the next part, I'd like to just ask board members if they've got questions, and we can kind of discuss this piece that you just presented. So, board members, do you have questions on this last section before we move on the projections?
I do.
Tanya?
Okay. Mr. Reese, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to clarify in the birth rate ratio, the ratio actually includes the migration of families. That's part of that? In other words, I just wanted to clarify that.
So for the birth to kindergarten ratio,
Yeah.
that capture rate,
The ratio piece, I know that they give us the count, but you said that there's a ratio they use to determine an estimation of how many of the births actually enter the school system?
Yes, so that factor, that capture rate, it's just based on comparing historical birth, to what we experienced as a system of entering kindergarten students. But it averages out sort of aspects, sort of like in and out migration. But it's an average.
Okay, but we do have historical data and historical trends in that.
We do have
Great.
historical information. So we rely on the Virginia Department, and I'm forgetting the name, but it's a health department that keeps records on births that take place in the county. So, and what they also do in order to get a full picture of the births is not just births that take place in Arlington hospitals to Arlington parents, but even if a child is born, for example, in DC at Sibley, but the parents have an Arlington address, they'll be counted in that as well. So it's just comparing, in point in time, how many births took place to Arlington parents, and then 5 years later, how many students we actually experienced entering kindergarten. But it's an average.
Right, it's a projection. It's not.
And so we take an average of 3. So we take 3 points in data from 3 points in time, and we build an average from that. And so then we apply that to the projected birth that the county provides us.
Okay, and that's why our projections, once we go past that 5-year mark, I think it's the 5-year mark, are hard to predict because we can't predict how many births.
Yes, so by 2022, so up to 2022, we're actually relying on applying that birth to kindergarten ratio to actual births that we know took place, and they're recorded by the state of Virginia.
Okay.
But starting in 2022, that's the first year when our entering kindergarten enrollment is based on the assumption from our partner in the county, how many births took place 5 years prior.
Right.
So it's I think it's worth noting that once you hit that year, it's based on an assumption, and then the following year, you're building 2 elementary cohort, 2 grade level cohorts built on that assumption as well, and so on.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I appreciate that clarification. And I think it's important to help the community understand how those numbers really impact our long-term projections and why numbers change from year to year because of some of those variables. The other thing I wanted to clarify, I think this may have been before your time with APS, but historically in the community, there's been a lot of discussion and sometimes contentious about the student generation factor in committed affordable housing. So I just want to clarify the comment, and if you can correct it if I am making it incorrectly. My understanding is that committed affordable housing units generate more students than market rate multiple family units. It's not an assumption that they generate more students than any other type of housing, because historically single family homes, or at least in more recent reports, single family homes have produced more students than the committed affordable housing. And because of the sensitivity in our community about where affordable housing is, I just want to clarify that you're comparing it to the market rate multifamily housing, which generally is really the one-bedroom apartments, sometimes studio apartments or housing units. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. When we look at the student generation rates, there's a hierarchy, and at the higher end, in terms of the average number of students that a type of unit will produce, you're right, it is the single-family detached home. And when I mentioned the affordable aspect, you were right, that it's when you look at the multifamily.
Yes, okay.
Within that type, it's the committed affordables at the higher end.
Great, thank you. I just want to clarify that because if at any point in the future that changes, then that is going to change how we look at housing in Arlington. But to date, it's still the case that our single-family detached homes generally produce higher student numbers than our committed affordable housing.
Yes, that's true. And one thing that we do is we monitor the student generation rates every year. So part of our partnership with the county, as well as to get their inventory of every single unit in the county. So they produce a special GIS data for us every year. So it represents all the existing housing as of July 1st of that year. And it includes, every single family, every single multifamily, townhome, et cetera. We match that with the actual student record information, and from that, we produce a student generation rate, not just countywide, but by the different school attendance zones. And so once, for example, that the school board adopted new elementary boundaries on December 6th, we went and just recalculated all the rates to reflect the new boundaries.
Great.
So we're monitoring that every year, and that's our way of being able to assess, well, are there any changes happening in any one housing type?
Okay, great. And that's something that we recently started doing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
As I understand it, the first time was at last projections round.
Great. No, I'm so excited about how we're working better and with the county and using and sharing tools and different projection methods. So thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Goldstein, for letting me ask those questions. It's very helpful.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on this. And the student generation factor is a percentage, right, of which housing type generates percentage-wise more students. You got to multiply that percentage by the actual number of units to find out the actual number of students who are coming to APS from that housing type. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. So, for example, when we work on the projections, we work at applying the student generation rates, again, by school boundary. So if it's the Abingdon boundary, if there's a new townhouse project or multifamily, we'll apply the latest student generation rate that applies to that specific boundary. But just for illustrative purposes, thinking about county-wide, the student generation rates, for single-family detached, it's 0.497. So what we assume is every new single-family detached home will produce that ratio of student. And in the aggregate, for example, in a school attendance zone, that can add up. It might seem small, but it adds up with the level of construction that we're anticipating and are experiencing. And so we apply that to information that the county provides us for new construction, which is also GIS data. So we're able to pinpoint it to the street, to the parcel, and that way apply it to the appropriate student generation rate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, and which, I know you update this every year. What's the latest version that you're looking at?
So
I think I'm looking at an older one.
Yes, so the latest version, and as Ms. Stengo alluded, next week we'll be releasing a methodology document as well as some of the key assumptions. So it'll have tables with student generation rates. These figures are from a data set that we received from the county for housing inventory as of the end of September 30th, 2018, that we matched with the enrollment as of September 30th, 2018.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other board members, other questions? Barbara?
Thank you very much. This is terrific. Unfortunately, you didn't create the one graph that I always rave about, and I wonder if it would be possible to follow up with that. You all know what it is. It's the cohorts, how many kids are in kindergarten, the bar graph that shows kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. It would be so useful to see that, because that really helps us see what's going on in a way that you've got it buried in here. But I actually think there are a couple of key takeaways that we have to really, really absorb. So there are two pieces of it. One is, it appears to be the case, we had been leveling off in our elementary growth. We've got now K through 5 are all about 2,200 students. This is why the bar graph is so helpful to see. But you're clearly projecting that kindergarten is going to start growing. This year it was 2,300, so it's going to start going to 2,400, 2,500. That's got to be what's underlying these projections.
Yes,
that kindergarten is going to continue growing.
At the elementary level,
yes,
the growth is always led by the incoming kindergarten assumptions.
Yes, and that has to be, by the way, even the births that Tanya had pointed out, the births, it's not because people are having more babies, it's actually more housing units with more people who then are creating more. So it's really all construction and development. And I think for me, this is the first time that we are finally seeing this work with the county and the information about development really feeding in a way that's very clear. And so the big takeaway for me tonight is our growth is continuing long-term. Until this update, the county and our data were kind of projecting that we were going to level off at some point, probably around 32,000 students. You're going beyond that. And what's really important, again, is when you're talking about 2,400, 2,500, et cetera, kindergartners, your 10-year projections are not showing how big we're going to be in 20 years, because all those kindergartners are not, the future projected kindergartners that you're projecting aren't going to be in high school in 10 years. They're going to be there in 20 years. So the bottom line of that is we're not seeing in this 10-year projection how many high school seats we are going to need. And so number one, to me, it's very urgent that we start providing information about our 20-year and beyond expectations. We're not going to be precise, but we need to know. One of the bottom lines of this is that our idea that 1,300 high school seats is sort of what we need is not enough. This looks to me like we really are going to need that full comprehensive high school after our Career Center project. And to me, that means we need to start thinking about how that package of high school seats, what that's really going to look like. The Career Center project, it looks to me, is not our final high school piece of our plan. So bottom line is this is really helpful. I think it really shows that we have continual growth. An elementary school every 2.5 years, a full middle school within 10 years, another one probably in 20, and beyond our current plans for high school, another high school down the road. I think we really need to clarify that story, and it's just really clear from this data in a way that I think it never has been before. So I think this is terrific. I'm really glad, Mr. Goldstein, that you stopped at this point, because this was, to me, the big takeaway that we wanted to make sure, that we emphasize out of this. So thank you very much.
I'd like to go after Barbara on this one because she's so good at this. And I actually conferred with her before. Here's the question I really wanted to go to what are our CIP plans? And I know that that's beyond this conversation, but in looking at this, my less expert eye also tells me that we thought we kind of hit the nail on the head, and we really do have to go further out because it takes us longer to plan buildings and build buildings. And now that we've pretty much used up all our space, it's going to take time to find the locations and build into a CIP the building of those buildings. But you've mentioned high school. It looks to me like in our CIP, we're really going to have to actually look at another elementary school or elementary seats in some fashion or another at a much larger number. And that is, I was going to point out the slide, it was slide 10. You say it, but I know that there are lots of ways to talk, but you said there isn't going to be implications. That bump in elementary school students, when our system, as we hear in the options and transfer report, and we've got every seat filled, Lionel's the first one who taught me this, there's a certain number you get to when you say you're probably going to have to build a building. And that's what that says to me. It says to me, we're going to have to put them in a high school. And I was calculating the number of seats we were saying we're going to be at the Ed Center, and it was 1,400 or 1,300. That's not enough. And we don't have a school for all those kids in our current CIP. We put one in the year after the end of the CIP, but it looks like, well, I know I'm presuming planning for the future, but I do think the communities here, we're taking this seriously. And I am so happy to hear all of this work being done, so our projections are closer and we can begin to, maybe with a little more confidence, go out further than our 10-year CIP to make some general plans about where we have to go. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Very much for that. For the whole, I know this is a team effort. So Lionel, we've been down this path, everybody. Michael's back there hiding. I know he's looking at all our houses from the sky. Thank you. There's a huge one going up next to me. I'm sure it's going to have 6 kids in it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to briefly follow up on that, and you can switch out. This is really for my colleagues. I'm just going to emphasize the word general plans, because after 2022, that's when we see the spike, but those kids aren't born yet. So something could happen, okay, in the next 5 years that takes us in a whole different direction. So as a board member, I'm happy to look at what, if nothing happens, what does it look like 15, 20 years, with the caveat that we can make plans that are very high level and just watch them, but be thoughtful in how quickly we implement for students who are not born yet. So,
yeah, I want to clarify that, though, because what's important about the information we got from the county, it's not really births, it's bedrooms. If we're building, there will be people who will move in with kids. So, you know, the birth rate actually is, I think, nationally has kind of flattened. It's not
the same variable.
Yeah.
But that's the expectation, that our economy continues to be great and wonderful and people want to come live here.
If
it gets too high and
right,
the economy crashes, we may have vacant housing. I'm just saying they're all variables, and I want us to plan, but I want us to plan without investing money until we know those numbers are a little more solid. And that's a discussion we can have at the CIP table, but I just wanted to, you know, as we're starting it now, you know, there are projections, and it's a good discussion, and thank you both. And Barbara, I do appreciate the analysis. That was really, really well said. Thank you.
All said. Good evening. I'm going to talk to you about.
Sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, we didn't get to my questions yet. Is Robert still here?
Just getting some exercise.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Goldstein. I did see him walking away, and I thought you were done. I apologize.
Oh, sorry.
We thought you were done, yeah.
So you only have a few. On slide, you're talking about the updated projections approach, and you say that the projections approach for option schools is different from the approach for neighborhood schools. Yeah, that's the slide. It's like several bullets down, or third bullet from the bottom.
Yes.
And could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so
the two different approaches.
Those approaches differed by school level. Looking for some of my slide with some context. So for example, so we'll have a detailed explanation on those assumptions in the report that will be published next week. But we talked to some of the principals at the different school levels, and from those conversations and trying to understand the different option programs, we built some assumptions as to how enrollment works in those programs. So for example, at the elementary level, we're for the incoming kindergarten classes, and again, kindergarten is very important at the elementary level. We're assuming for most of the option programs that incoming kindergarten class will be based on the prior year's spring update to the enrollment projection. So, for example, this February, we'll be doing an update to the next 2019-2020 school year enrollment projections. They'll be slightly different than the ones that we'll be publishing now. And that'll be informed with more up-to-date January information. So based on that and conversations with principals, we'll be publishing information on the number of students that we anticipate at the kindergarten level for staffing and budgetary purposes. So for us, those similar decisions that were made last February, we took them into account for the incoming kindergarten students for this projection round. In addition, how the student progresses from one grade level to another differs by the type of option program that it is. For example, for a program like an immersion at Key, we assume that once you have that entering kindergarten student, the other thing that becomes important is a cohort transition rate. For an immersion program, we made the assumption that we would base that cohort transition rate based on trends from the past 3 years. And our rationale for that was that for a program like that, where children, if they would exit the program at any one time, they can't be easily replaced because there's a language requirement. There's a proficiency requirement there. And so we're using the cohort transition rate, which on average will assume either from one grade to another, on average, you've got a net gain or you've had a net loss. So in that case, we're, again, basing it on the last year's spring update for the incoming kindergarteners, and how we transition students from one grade to another level is based on a 3-year average. For other schools, like Arlington Traditional, again, we based the incoming kindergartner on that same, using that same data source, but how we transition them from one grade to another differs. In that case, we made the assumption, for example, of a cohort transition rate fixed to 1.0, which basically means if a student at any, for example, at the 3rd grade level would exit the program, because of the waiting list at that program, that another student can be brought in, and there isn't that language requirement, that aspect that would constrain a new student from coming in. So that's what we did for all the option programs, that we did it at all the grade levels where we made assumptions. And that's one of the things that in the assumptions portion of the report that will be published, we went we went into a lot of detail in explaining how those changes would occur.
And I just want to add something. So last year, I noticed when we were doing projections, we actually projected at the option schools just like we did at the neighborhood schools. But they're lottery schools, and we hold a certain number of seats, and we have full classes at that entry-level point. So we fill up that class And so what we did was we actually set that class size so it starts there at a full class and it carries forward versus projecting. We know we're going to pull from other schools and we're going to take kids from there. And when Dr. Johnson talks in a minute about the annual update, when we sat down with principals to look at enrollment across our elementary schools with the new boundaries, we were able to sort of look, can we provide some relief at the same time to the option schools? They had more classes last year. As everybody was full to the max, we added a 5th kindergarten class at ATS. This year, we're taking it down a level. So that conversation about how we control their enrollment, because they don't have to accommodate neighborhood kids enrolling all summer like our neighborhood schools do.
So I was keying on your example about the immersion schools. So if you were to lose, if we were to lose an immersion student in 3rd grade, for instance, then we'd likely not be able to replace that seat. So whereas enrollment at a neighborhood school could fluctuate, we could have a net increase or a net decrease. Likely at an immersion school, we would not have a net increase.
So in that example, it would be treated similarly. So what we look at is like trends from the prior 3 years, or sometimes this was another methodological change that we did. Traditionally, we would look at the trends from, like, example, a child trend going from 3rd grade to fourth grade for 3 years. So in that immersion example, we look at that for 3 years. For some neighborhoods, we do a similar process, but another caveat that we spell out in the updated methodology is for some schools, we would calculate that cohort transition rate based on 2 years. So even among the treatment of the different neighborhood schools, some were treated differently than others based on some of the change that they've experienced recently. So for example, some of the schools that experienced the discovery process, we talked with the consultant and in our internal review committee and decided to use a cohort transition rate of 2 years versus other schools that haven't had change, we based it on 3 years. And then especially at the elementary level, because of the changes to the options and transfer policy, we actually developed a weighted average cohort transition rate. So it's a lot of assumptions that we built in how do we treat different types of schools. Besides just options in neighborhoods, even among neighborhoods, they were treated differently.
Okay, thank you. If you could go to slide 9, please. And I know Nancy asked this question, and so I'd kind of like to get a little bit more detail, and that is, what do these changes in projections mean for our plans for capacity growth that's now set out in the CIP? And I'm not anticipating having a full CIP discussion, but where we see this kind of significant change, over 10 years, we know it's going to have some kind of ramifications in the CIP. What would be the next steps from here towards adjusting our CIP?
Mr. Goldstein, I was wondering if I could jump in here, and I really appreciate this presentation, and I think this is great information. But Robert, let me ask you, prior to tonight, what was our 10-year projection at this point in time last year? What were we forecasting, especially for elementary? You don't need to show me any charts and graphs. Just generically, what was it?
So for elementary, we had projected at elementary level 13,258 students. The actual enrollment that came in slightly higher at 13,351.
But for elementary, what's happened based on these projections is we're seeing a continued uptick, where we had predicted that necessarily there wasn't going to be much change there, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So we have 1 year's worth of information here, right?
That's correct. And as I mentioned previously, a projection is built on assumptions. And so after the year 2022, some caution should be observed because we are starting to build a projection based on the assumptions on future kindergarteners and some of the construction that the county's anticipating actually materializing.
Right. So I guess I want to caution us all. We've got to see patterns, some stronger patterns playing themselves out. And when we go out an extended period of time, the reliability of those projections falls off dramatically, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So we're talking about investing millions of dollars into capital. And I think we need to sort of take a breath, look at this 1 year, and then begin to work from there and see if these patterns begin to play themselves out over a longer period of time.
But the 1 year new information ripples forward to higher enrollment numbers in the future, and we've got a 5-year lead time.
Right, time horizon.
Building. Right. So when we see something 5 years out or 4 years out or something like that, that takes us beyond our current capacity. We need to do something about it, acknowledging that the predictions aren't may be a little squishy.
Okay.
I think we can have this discussion.
Right. This is just new information as of tonight, so let's fully digest it and think through this. It's going to take a lot of planning and a lot of thinking. But I also appreciate the team and the work that they've done, and also some of the new methodology that they've brought to the plate to kind of hone this in with a greater degree of preciseness.
Right, exactly, and the precision is kind of the basis of my questions here. Have you taken into consideration the arrival of Amazon?
So,
no, this is difficult because we don't have any solid timelines from them yet on, exactly when.
So I've talked with my colleague, the demographer in Arlington County's planning department in CPHD. She's the one who provides us a lot of the information, and the person that we work with a lot of the assumptions that we're making from the county side. The way that we've rationalized the Amazon effect is that through their master plans, the county has assumed development in Crystal City, Pentagon City, Potomac Yard. They've assumed commercial development and jobs, and with commercial development and jobs, households will follow. Those employees who will create households will follow. So they've always anticipated an increase in jobs. It's just that now, instead of that job, that employer, being an assumption, now they have a name. It's Amazon. And so as they've been developing their projections for or forecasts for employment, they've also been forecasting household and residential growth. Because again, the employment is the engine, and then households follow. And so in a sense, they have been forecasting employment of that magnitude with the households that will follow that type of employment. So in a way, we have. What could change is the timing. One thing that we will include in the report is every single building that we're assuming will get developed in the county according to the county with a year. But those years could shift up. If developers see opportunity, instead of a project occurring in 2022, it might be 2020. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at for the next projection round is the county, adjusting some of the timing for some of the projects based on developers, developing more residential quicker rather than maybe at a more modest pace, which is, what we might have right now.
Okay, all right, thank you. I asked that question because obviously there's a lot of, questions, floating around in the community and in the school communities about the arrival and impact of Amazon. Two more quick questions. The 10-year projections that, based on this, by school, when will they be available?
They will be available next week. They'll be included in the report. So it'll be the 10 years projections, again, by school, as you said.
And that'll be posted?
Yes, that will
at
be
that time,
posted
sometime next week?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed these projections do not include pre-K students. Now, why is that? Because we historically refer to the total pre-K through 12 enrollment number.
That's correct. And in the report, we'll include the pre-K numbers as well, and they'll be on the table. But for this purpose, since we're talking about the projections of what we actually, worked on projecting, we only included the K-12. One thing that I think is not quite understood is that in every projection that has been published, that pre-K number is actually not a projection. Again, it's an estimate by Teaching and Learning for budget purposes of what they anticipate will be the pre-K enrollment by school the next school year. So for us, it will be for 2019-2020. And we append that to every projection year as an estimate of pre-K will be about this much we anticipate for the next 10 years based on that 1 year's worth of information.
Is that because we have a ceiling, the pre-K seats?
That I am not sure about. I'm not sure if
I'll jump in here. The pre-K number is what I'd call a static number, and it's based on the various programs that we have and the funding that we receive. So that number is pretty static. We accept just over 1,000 students annually, and so we meet that capacity regularly.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's the end of my questions. Barbara, did you want to follow up? You had something? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Sarah, I'm sorry. And I guess we're going to move to your part of the presentation.
Absolutely. So good evening again. And I'm going to walk you through some of the changes that are in place for the upcoming school year based on the annual update. As you know, and as mentioned earlier, that the annual update provides information about enrollment levels at each school or program, transportation, as well as the recommendations to achieve the goals stated in the policy. As we continue to provide more equitable access to all programs and schools for our students, the following changes were made to how the options and transfers policy is implemented. The application, lottery, and waitlist processes have been streamlined and are still managed by the Welcome Center. Changes were made to how the waitlists are managed. They no longer carry over from year to year. For option programs in schools, the list is maintained throughout the entire year until the next lottery. For neighborhood transfers, the list is maintained until May 1st. So up until that time, as more seats become open, they are filled. After May 1st, no more transfers will be accepted.
Can you just, that was a lot of information to take in.
Sure.
Not for anybody else, you just can, that's a big change for people. I just wanted to stop for a second so that we acknowledge what that is, because it's new.
So why don't we let her finish
Okay.
with her part of the presentation, and we'll go back to the slides that are you have questions on, and we can elaborate then.
Okay. So for option programs in schools, the list is maintained until the next lottery. For neighborhood transfers, the list is maintained until May 1st. Up until that time, seats will continue to be filled, and after May 1st, transfers will no longer be available. I'm sorry. Okay. Develop the numbers that were available for neighborhood transfers and for option seats. We worked with principals from all the various levels and as well as staff from other supporting central office departments. This was an opportunity for everyone to look at the plans that were being implemented holistically across the entire district, not just school by school. What you can see is a list of some of the documents that were used to help make these decisions. The draft 2018 projections for the upcoming 2019 school year, information on school capacity within the building and with relocatables, and the facilities optimization study. So, the elementary school boundary process expanded the attendance zone for some schools. When schools need capacity for grade K-5 enrollment, APS will move pre-K programs. This is an opportunity to move programs closer to where students who access the programs live. Principals and central office staff work together to identify locations for these programs, and a list of these program moves will be available later on. Moving on to the elementary school transfers and option seats. The new elementary school boundaries go into effect this September 2019, and there will be no transfers available to other neighborhood schools for that year. The number of classes in the 5 elementary option schools are listed, and more information about these programs is available online on the Options and Transfers webpage. At the middle school level, the middle school boundary changes go into effect in September. The changes have impacted the capacity of schools at different levels. Schools that are at capacity will not accept incoming student transfers. Instead, priority will be given to current students whose boundaries have changed but who wish to remain at their current school. At schools that have capacity, transfers are available and they will accept new incoming students. At the high school level, limited transfers are available. Information about all secondary school neighborhood transfers and option seats are available on the Options and Transfers webpage. As a reminder, families are responsible for transportation to and from school for students who receive transfers. And then finally, an outlook on boundaries. The elementary and middle school boundaries go into effect in September 2019. There will be no changes to high school boundaries until the Education Center opens with new seats in 2021. In preparation for the upcoming boundary processes, staff will evaluate the alignment of all planning units. And that's the end of it.
Okay, thank you. So that was a lot of information to digest. So board members, do you have comments or questions on what Sarah's presented? Nancy?
Okay, I'll start with 12, slide 12, where I stopped for a minute before, because I did know that information, but I think it's really important for people to digest it, because when I moved to Arlington, if you wanted to go to one of the option schools, you put your name in, and then it sat on that list for all the years that your kids were potentially in elementary school or potentially in middle school or high school. And it just happened, it just rolled over. So what you're saying now is if I have a kindergartner and I wanted to go to Arlington Traditional School and I didn't get in, I would be on the wait list for that year.
Correct.
And if I wanted to be considered when my child went to first grade, I'd have to put my name back in and ask to potentially have an opportunity to come in if an opening came up.
Correct.
Okay, so every year, they're going to have to put their name back in, and there's no long-term, like I don't move up from number 1 to number 20 to number 19. Every year, that number ends up being different. I could be number 1 one year, and I could be number 20 in 1 year.
Correct.
I think that those are really important distinctions, because people used to think as they moved up, that, and through the system, there'd be a more and more likelihood that they would get closer to be able to get into whatever school they wanted to get into.
And by doing it this way, it actually allows more students to have a chance to actually apply for those schools and to get into them as well. So what also used to happen in the past is you could have your name on a waiting list for 2 or 3 different schools, accept a slot at one school, and then wait until your number comes up to actually go to the school that you want to go to. So what that did is it basically stopped a student who might want to be at the school you're currently at from getting in while you wait for another seat to open at another school. What we wanted to make sure is that all students could have, access to these various schools and programs.
It's a change, and, people learn things word of mouth, and I hope that our website is very, very clear, and that when we do our information nights, that I would suggest that we really deliberately stop and say this, because it's going to take them a while to catch up, because they're going to learn from talking to their neighbors. So I want to be sure people understand. I don't have a problem with it. It's different, it's new, it'll take an adjustment for some people. The other question I had was on slide 16. I'm going to beat this message. You said emphatically that the neighborhood middle schools will not, the ones we had specified, will not accept transfers. The answer is, at this point, however, there are wait lists for those
Correct.
schools. And we have to say that, because when we just say categorically, period, they will not accept transfers, people think the issue's over.
Right.
And you may have someone who's slated to go to Kenmore who then chooses to go to HB Woodlawn, and I know you calculated that in, but let's say that happens
Right.
more than you thought, or they move, you might have a spot.
Absolutely. So, and for that goes for the neighborhood transfers and the option seats. The lottery will be run, and there will be wait lists that are maintained. And for option schools, again, it'll go through to the end of the school year before the next lottery. And then for the neighborhood schools, it'll continue being drawn from until May 1st.
But there'll be one for every school.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other clarification I wanted to make is you said, if you're a transfer, you will not be provided with transportation. However, with Gunston, Kenmore, and Jefferson, there is transportation for students who are not in their catchment area.
Correct. And so I think that's something we need to go back and talk about. So that is correct.
Because there are buses from every piece of Arlington that go to those schools.
Correct.
So,
So I will get.
and unless there's some change, I don't know how I really would like clarity on that, because up to this point, Kenmore, because it's arts and technology, and Jefferson, because it's IB, if you lived in the Jamestown district, or you lived in the Hoffman-Boston district, or, I'm sorry, Oak Ridge, and then you went to Jefferson or to Kenmore, you had bus transportation to those schools because of their magnet-type program.
And I should also clarify, so the programs that are countywide that get transportation still get them. I'm specifically talking about if you are zoned to go to Jefferson, but you choose to go to Ham instead. If that's a transfer that you take.
Or Williamsburg.
Then if that's a transfer that you take, that's when you would be responsible for transportation.
But that's a distinction, and the comment was, if you transfer, you don't have transportation. And I want us to be clear about that, because I'm a big proponent for Jefferson, Kenmore, and Gunston to be able to have as many transfers as possible. In the world of perfects, we can get there one day. I don't know how it would happen, but I don't want to go backwards on that, because those are high-demand programs. They're great schools. The diversity is phenomenal there. It's a capacity issue, but I don't want to change the model and say, if you're choosing to transfer there, you aren't going to get transportation, because you are. Please, please, please tell me that's not changing. I want to make sure that that's not changing.
Can you just rephrase that last statement again, Nancy?
If you choose to transfer from anywhere in the county to Jefferson or Kenmore or Gunston, you have transportation to those schools. Ham, no, because it doesn't have a specialized program, but those other three do.
So let's.
Yeah,
and
they
I guess,
do.
Here's
for immersion.
Well, here's the
Gunston
thing.
for-
Right. So I think maybe.
But
you may
someone,
need,
I just.
I know, because yeah.
But clarified and then stated correctly in our materials.
Correct. So we will continue to have those buses at Kenmore and at, Gunston, because of the immersion and the Montessori program, and as well at Jefferson. I think the other piece that's coming up is we're going to talk about, in February, you're going to hear about the pre-K-12 instructional program pathways. That's actually redefine which are our options, and any of the options will have countywide transportation, and I would expect those are part of that discussion. So right now, they have transportation. After you adopt pathways, we'll have clarity around all of this.
I think we need to clarify. I think we need to ask a follow-up. I don't need this answer today, but there's two factors at play. If you transfer to Kenmore or Gunston or TJ under the basis of the arts and tech program at Kenmore, the immersion program at Gunston, and the IB program at TJ, you're considered an option transfer and are provided transportation. I am asking, if you are a neighborhood transfer and you applied as a neighborhood transfer, do you get a letter in the mail over the summer?
There's
saying,
no distinction. There's no distinction. There is no such thing as to that program. There just isn't.
Let's let Sarah answer the question.
Well, I don't expect Sarah, or this is a transportation question, so I'm requesting an official follow-up from Dr. Murphy, because it's unclear to me, and I don't think we have the answers tonight. I think, so I just wanted to have that follow-up, so I'm not, Ms. Van Dorn, I'm not saying that you're wrong, I just want to hear it from transportation.
My point is that we can doff this off onto a follow-up, but the fact of the matter is that information nights are coming. We're having this presentation this evening. That has been the policy, and unless somebody's going to say it's changing, that's the policy. So I would like clarity, because I was never informed as a board member that it was going to change.
No, when I spoke specifically about transfers, it was not to say that there was not going to be transportation to the countywide programs because it's currently provided. I specifically, and I needed to clarify, I'm specifically talking about if you chose a transfer to a neighborhood school, that has been the transportation issue.
And I know that this is going into granular detail, but the IB program at Jefferson is school-wide. The arts and technology program at Kenmore is school-wide. You can't apply to those programs. It's the same thing. At immersion at Gunston, it's different, and at Montessori at Gunston, it's different because they are discrete programs. But IB and arts and technology, up to this point, it's the whole school, so there isn't a neighborhood transfer and an IB transfer.
No, I'm not talking about, but what I'm saying is.
Right. Okay. Dr. Murphy.
Yes.
Could you develop an explanation of this and possibly bring it back to us at the next board meeting?
Right. I think what I'm hearing, though, is that families need to know. So I think what would be probably the best step is to clarify this discussion, make that information available on the website so families know, and then also follow up with you folks so that you have the background or you have the knowledge.
That would be good. Is there a deadline by which the families need to know?
I think as opposed to kind of off the cuff this evening, I think we can have something up by Monday or Tuesday. I think it would be very easy to kind of shrink wrap this and, make it available and also get the board the information.
Okay, and then alert the community as to where it can be found on the website.
Right.
With this kind of clearer explanation.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I actually have a question on this. Maybe you can add that to the explanation.
As do I.
And that is the difference between a transfer student and a lottery, someone transferring with lottery status. So, for instance, if right now you're saying that Williamsburg, Ham, and Swanson would be able to accept transfers.
Ham and Williamsburg can take new incoming student transfers.
Ham and Williamsburg?
Yes.
Not Swanson?
I'm sorry?
Not Swanson?
Not Swanson.
Just Ham and Williamsburg?
Correct.
Okay, but if so many people applied to transfer that their capacity utilization went up to some unacceptable level, you would institute a lottery process, right?
Yes, if there are more applicants than seats, then there is a lottery held, yes.
Okay, and if then someone were chosen through the lottery, would their lottery number have to change year to year?
No, I mean, once you enter school and you transfer into school, you stay there to the terminal grade. So if you lotteried into Ham, you don't have to apply each year to keep that lottery spot. You're a student at HAM until the terminal grade.
Unlike a lottery status at an option school.
Well, but for an option school, if you go through the lottery and you get a seat, you stay in that option school to the terminal grade as well.
Oh,
So
right,
there-
I'm sorry. I meant wait list. Someone waitlisted because now there's a lottery at a neighborhood school for transfers.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'll submit the question in writing after the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions on the same
Please.
matter, and then if Ms. Van Doren had more questions. And just to clarify on the lottery piece, the lottery expires every year.
Correct.
So if you did not get in, you are waitlisted at an option school for the remainder of that school year, but the last day of school, that lottery dissolves, and you have to had reapplied during the application period, which is early in the fall, for the following year.
Yes.
Okay. And for a lottery, for someone who's someone's applying to HAM or to Williamsburg this year, that lottery will dissolve. That wait list, if there's a wait list for those two, because it's a neighborhood transfer, that wait list will dissolve May 1st.
Correct.
So after May 1st, there's no longer wait list. And if you want to apply to transfer, you will have to see what the transfer update report tells us next year to see if there's availability for you to transfer into a neighborhood school.
Correct.
Those two in particular, since those are the ones that are open this year.
Can I answer this one? So, and when we worked with the principal groups, and Cynthia Johnson actually had brought this to our attention early on, and each one of them have reiterated this. One of the issues with continuing to take neighborhood transfers over the summer is a staffing issue. They're staffed up for what is in the spring projections, and they're getting neighborhood kids over the summer. And then when they continue to get the transfers, what we've seen is we have sort of staffing in the wrong place. We've got more kids coming to some schools, and they don't have the right number of teachers there. So they really asked this from a scheduling and a staffing to make sure they had the resources so kids could get what they needed in their classes.
Okay. And we don't have that same issue at option schools because we manage the actual enrollment there.
And they don't have to,
Right.
they don't need to take neighborhood
Correct.
students
They
in the
can't-
same
right.
way.
You
So
don't
they're
get-
not getting the kids that way. They fill the seat that is vacated by when another
They
student
don't have
leaves.
that constant variable that exists for them throughout the year.
Right.
Okay, and then the next piece is on the transportation, which is also through a neighborhood transfer. So there's been I've got a call about a community member who wants to, who is neighborhood to TJ and wants to transfer to Williamsburg. So they're applying for a neighborhood transfer. They will not be provided transportation.
Correct.
Okay, so now I'm going to provide feedback. But at the transportation work session, we discussed that they would look at a plan for if you didn't have transportation, you could maybe go to a bus stop that does have transportation. And I am curious, we don't need an answer, but the consideration that, for instance, if a family has the ability to travel to a bus stop, even though it's not assigned to their neighborhood, would they be allowed to ride the bus? And we don't need an answer, but as we're looking at using bus utilization and recognizing that we are not providing them transportation, there will not be a bus stop on a route for that student or students in a neighborhood that's not zoned to the school. Is that an option that we can offer? And again, we don't need an answer tonight because that's in the transportation discussion and work plan that they're looking at, but I just wanted to provide that if that's a possibility for transfers.
So we will work with Kristen Haldeman, who did the work session the other night, and I know when we sent out the letters to the immersion families who were impacted by the boundary changes, that was the language that was given. If your neighborhood is no longer in the attendance zone and you're getting a bus to the school, you can actually go in and hop on a bus in the feeder zone to that school. So there are some things, and we would have to work with them to find out what could be accommodated.
And so as a general practice, I believe what we try and do is we try and accommodate families. And in this case, if there is space available, we would definitely try and accommodate families in some way, shape, or form as a general theme or a general practice. And I think all of our staff do a very nice job with that, and I know transportation as a practice tries to do that as well.
And just to clarify, not accommodate them by providing them a bus stop, but accommodate them by allowing them to go to a pre-assigned bus stop that they can get themselves to. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
If there's space, and I would imagine there would be space available on the bus.
Great, I'll turn it over to Ms. Stengel.
Okay, Barbara?
I'd like to change the topic. Actually, first, let me just weigh in on our scheduling. I actually was surprised that this annual update was on our regular board meeting agenda. It's, I think, pretty clear after this much discussion. I think we started this maybe around 8 o'clock. We should really have a work session or think about having the annual update as a work session rather than in this format going forwards. Maybe something to think about for future chairs and Dr. Murphy. There's clearly a lot of discussion and interest and combination of questions and, providing input, et cetera, that I think would be a good work session, better under the work session format. My question is about the option schools and the kindergarten sizes. I don't remember the slide number, but it might be helpful to pull that up. So first of all, our option schools have partly out of constraints, but also over time out of our strategizing. 3 of our option schools especially have taken on additional burdens of our overcrowding. ATS, Key, and Claremont. I think they're 3 of some of our most crowded schools. We have neighborhood schools that are just as crowded, but these 3 schools particularly are at 110, 120% capacity each. It's interesting because the Claremont crowding was one of the things that started us on this entire journey to do options and transfers a couple of years ago. My understanding was that as we got to this point, and we just did South Arlington boundaries to alleviate all of those schools, many of which feed into Claremont, that at this point we would be able to alleviate Claremont a little bit by maybe going down to, if not 4, 5 kindergartens. I know it's interesting because the parent groups anyway are advocating differently between Key and Claremont. Key parents want to be big. And Claremont, I understand, my sense is don't necessarily want to be, but why are you recommending 6 kindergartens for Claremont?
So we did talk about after the boundary process, actually bringing that level down at the 2 schools and the way the program is designed, and we've got our experts here. It is, you have an English-speaking class and a Spanish-speaking class. They have half the day in one, and then they flip for the other part. And as we talked about it, we looked for where to possibly put it, but when they looked at the logistics of how do you provide services for students with special needs and some of the concerns of the families and providing specials in Spanish and all these things, and putting it into, if we move those classes to another school, because people are really concerned about not having the same number of classes, because now, fewer families get access to it. We had looked at putting them at other schools, maybe 2, kindergarten classes at another school, but they were really worried about the program and what they were getting. And so as we've talked with them, I think they came back to the feeling of we should keep it and make a plan for longer term. As we're looking at some other things with immersion, how do we plan to continue to allow access? Because the biggest entry point is at kindergarten, and if you don't continue to keep the kids, then you don't have a middle school program. So there is a lot of concern about that, allowing the program to grow from that starting level. So working with the principals, we came to, this was where we landed, was 6 kindergarten classes at both schools.
I'm skeptical. I want to share that, particularly about Claremont. That is not what we have heard consistently from that community. And I don't want to put the principal on the spot. And I know, everyone's playing a different role in this room. I personally would be interested in finding out more about whether that school can handle another 6 kindergarten class size. I mean, this is a facility issue. I understand the instructional, we want access. We want families who want immersion to get it, but we do have constraints. And my understanding is we've had years of Claremont being, at the breaking point. So I would like to ask that we spend a little more time on that one. And I don't know who the liaison is to Claremont, but I really think that we should work with that community on this. My suggestion as one board member.
Okay. And Tanya, you had a couple of questions.
I did. We can stay on the same slide. I was the liaison of Claremont, I believe it was last year, and I did, or the year before, or I'm sorry, I was not, but I attended because I attended on behalf of James Lander because I was able to speak Spanish, and they had a joint PTA, Spanish and English, and I did tour the school, and I do share Dr. Cannon's concern. The school was run very well, and it was impressive to see how it did not feel crowded, but I did have parents tell me about the 3 lunches and how early they had to start and some of the stresses that the school was having, and especially during drills where how they have to get kids down to a certain part of the school. So I do share that concern. I will say, however, that I did also receive a phone call from a community member who I believe was a Claremont parent who is concerned about the program shrinking. So there's a lot of mixed feelings out there because of what the experience that we're having with immersion, but I do think that it is worth a revisit, especially at Claremont because of the facility. So I just wanted to support Dr. Cannon's point on that. And I also wanted to get a clarification on the Montessori Public School of Arlington and satellites. When you say 17 primary classes, I just want to clarify, that's not 17 primary classes at Henry. That's
No.
17 primary classes countywide, and it includes some of the satellite classes that we're still going to have next year, even
Yes.
though Montessori Public School of Arlington will be opening.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next question I had was on slide 12. The last bullet, seat allocations for countywide HB Woodlawn program were modified to ensure more equitable access to all APS students. It's slide 12, and it was the last bullet. And I believe that was updated in our PIP. And what we are doing, just to clarify for the community, is that each elementary school now has slots that are allotted to HB Woodlawn, and that's how the lottery will work for that.
Yes.
I don't know, I know that the PIP was updated, and I know that, I think we sent information out when people were applying, but we have an opportunity to just help people understand, people who may have not been paying attention, that that's changed where before it was based on your neighborhood, now it's actually based on the elementary school. And this is to allow more equitable access to HB Woodlawn.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And can you just go a little bit into explanation of how you averaged out the slots for each school? I know it was very based on a good method to ensure equitable access.
So we looked at our current 5th grade class this September, and we allocated the slots proportionally to each of our schools. We also, we do get people from outside of APS who want to apply as well, and so we don't actually know the number of 5th graders across the county. There's not, if they enrolled in a Catholic school or if they enrolled in a private school, we may never come in contact with that student. So what we did for that group was we actually looked at the number of applicants last year and gave them a proportion that was equal to what we did for the elementary schools the same way.
Great. Thank you. I just wanted to have the opportunity to share that with the community so that they understand how HB Woodlawn will be working this year. And then my last question is on slide 17. Just reiterating that there will be no changes to high school boundaries until new seats open at WNL in 2021. And I know that we had talked about tweaks. I know that there were a couple of planning units who were moved during the high school boundary process, and they had come up during the middle school boundary process. I think it was Boulevard Manor in particular. But we're not going to do that because we are not sure how the alignments are going to set out, and because we're doing another boundary process in 2021 to accommodate the Ed Center seats. We want to make sure that there aren't any other units in the community overall, in APS overall, that may be experiencing similar situations, and really understand how that will play out. And I just wanted to get a little bit of extra clarification so that community members who are looking for that answer, we're providing that answer to them tonight.
And what you said is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's correct. For those who are looking at Boulevard Manor area, there's a bigger area. We have the students in the, I think they're called the Patrick Henry Apartments. And when you look at that collectively, if today we move 1 unit or 2 units, we're isolating other units. And we have some grandfathering students that are, we have students that are grandfathered into Washington Lee, and that is affecting the actual number of students going to Yorktown in that particular area. But overall, the numbers will not be that low as we move forward. And we just want to be thoughtful of how we manage our boundary and our schools enrollment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
One more quick question. Slide 15, the option school kindergartens. Yeah, the last row. Now that does not mean that all 17 primary classes are moving to the Montessori public school.
No, these include the classes that are at the Montessori school as well as the classes that are satellites that are at other schools as well.
And do you have a breakout in numbers of what that would be, Montessori public versus the satellites?
I don't. I mean, we could get back to you, and
Why don't we do this, because this question has come up, and we'll correct this slide, or we'll make a notation on this slide to sort of delineate those that will be at the future site and those will be at what will be at the satellites. I think that's the best way to do it, because it's very easy to construe, the statement that you shared, Mr. Goldstein.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And there's one more piece with that. It's only the 3-year-olds. It's, that those classes are made up of a third of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So while there's 17 classes, it's a portion of those 17 classes.
Because the 4 and 5-year-olds are already in that class, because they got in at 3 years old.
The 3-year-olds will be 4-year-olds next year. They continue. The 4-year-olds continue. So really, we're entering a third of the class, which is that 3-year-old entry point, and then filling any seats if somebody moves out of the program.
I look forward to seeing that table, that explanation. Thank you.
Will this information be in the annual update report? Okay, and will there be a little bit more explanation as to why we're not moving high school boundaries until 20? I just want the community to have a place to access and understand it, so they're not just hearing it in our conversation.
Yeah, and like the other information, and you'll see a slide on it, we are going to post this information next week. We're not showing it today because those conversations with our staff and our families who are going to be impacted by some of the program moves are happening this weekend. And so we want to make sure they know before we actually put this information out there and they're finding out in person.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody want to do the next steps piece of this presentation?
All right, so that would be here an hour ago. So I wanted to just give some context for the discussion now. So we had our projections show really a different trend at the elementary level. And at the next school board meeting, you're going to hear about the pre-K-12 instructional program pathways. There's some staff work going on. We've got a new strategic plan. We're changing as a school system. As we add new schools, we need to be thoughtful about how new schools fit within what we provide and making sure, if someone's looking at the county and they come into the schools, how do I access it? If something's not working for my child, where do I go? Or if I'm new, but my child speaks Spanish, can I jump into the immersion program? So we really need to articulate this so everybody understands and we're very clear in what we have, and there's no differences in opinions about which is our options in neighborhood schools. We want to make sure that we provide the resources that call that out. Immersion is one of our pathways. It is one of our it's already in place. It's very clear. It articulates to the high school level, and it will be part of that. And so you'll hear about that on February 7th at the school board meeting, and then we do have a work session where maybe that even plays in with some options and transfer issues on the 12th. And then we're also conducting 3 evaluations right now where we're in the data gathering phase. We're looking at ESOL HILT, which is for our English learners. we are looking at special education and world languages. And the world languages evaluation includes immersion. And within that, we've heard a lot of questions from the immersion community, particularly when we did the middle school boundary process, and immersion was part of the discussion. And we are gathering information through that we think would actually be helpful as we're talking about what to do as we move forward. So I would actually like to have Dr. Natters come up for a minute and give us a little overview of immersion in APS.
Oh, you're right there. I am. I was being quick. Good evening. So thank you, Ms. Stengel. One of the things that has come up with the boundary conversations as well as with the projections and other things is a larger conversation about immersion. And so one of the things that we really want to ensure both the community as well as our staff is that we have a very strong commitment to the immersion program. Immersion is an incredibly strong model, and as we go down the path, as Ms. Stengel was talking about with the pre-K 12 instructional program pathways, we are going to be further defining options and transfer schools, which is part of the conversation right earlier with the when do we provide transportation, when do we not, which are defined, how does that look? That will be a big part of the conversation. And I think one of the key things that we really want to reassure folks of is that we are committed to our immersion programs. Our immersion program provides opportunities for all of our students within that program to really develop their speaking comprehension and listening skills in both languages. And our model is based on a 50-50 balance of native Spanish speakers as well as, we say, speakers of English and other languages. We sometimes have students who are speaking Japanese who are maybe in the immersion program and they're picking up 3 languages, right, as they're going through elementary school. And so part of what we will be looking at and what you see here is this idea of which locations within APS really allow for us to strengthen and potentially grow the immersion program. And so we will be looking at, as part of the pre-K-12 instructional program pathways, what are those locations that really provide equitable access to our students so that we can continue with the two-way instructional model and enrollment of our native Spanish speakers. It is really important to this program that we have that 50-50 split, and so as we're looking at projections and as we're thinking about things like boundaries, how does that impact what we're doing with immersion? So the most important piece to this is that we are committed to that program and that we will continue to look at where is the best place for that program to live within APS. And when I say place, I'm thinking about which schools, K-12, because we have a really nice K-12 articulation of that program. And in the spirit of 50-50 Spanish and English, Cynthia Johnson is going to come up and speak to the same in Spanish this evening.
Okay, buenas noches. Voy a compartir este mensaje en español para la comunidad. Me llamo Cynthia Johnson y fui la directora de Claremont por 10 años y eso fue antes la directora de Key, pero después de las 2 directoras que están aquí esta noche. So quiero notar y reconocer a Jessica Panfield de Claremont y a Marlene Perdomo de Key. La importancia de ser bilingüe y ofrecer la oportunidad para nuestros estudiantes en participar en el programa de inmersión es algo fantástico. Y el cual recibe el apoyo de las escuelas públicas de Arlington desde 1986. Es importante mantener y crecer el programa de inmersión, que tiene mucho valor y gran éxito. Inmersión es efectivo en el desarrollo de los estudiantes en hablar y en escribir y en leer en 2 idiomas, y también en el conocimiento de las culturas. El modelo de instrucción es dividido en 50% en inglés y 50% en español. Queremos asegurar a todos que tenemos un buen entendimiento del programa de inmersión de APS, en donde los estudiantes aprenden no solamente de los profesores, pero de unos de otros. Lo que vamos a hacer ahora es reevaluar las decisiones alrededor de Arlington Science Focus y otros lugares para inmersión, y pensar con cuidado esos lugares que pueden asegurar el acceso para todos los estudiantes. Y en hacer esta decisión es importante tratar de mantener el 50% en cada idioma y dar más oportunidades a los estudiantes que son hablantes de español. La participación de ambos estudiantes, hablantes de inglés y de español, ayuda al éxito del programa. Y es muy importante que el programa esté al alcance de toda la comunidad. Muchas gracias.
So our next steps are we'll have a work session on the pathways on February 12th. In April, we're going to update the spring projections to include all of the moves and the things that you saw. So when you see the projections right now, you're going to see the entry-level classes at option schools that you saw this fall, but the spring projections will update those. The options and transfer policy follow-up is going to happen later this spring. You'll probably see something in April. There were those outstanding items, and in that, the community will have an option to react, to provide some input on the pathways visioning before you adopt that in May. They'll also be able to look at expanding sibling preference and lottery alternatives. We are continuing to look for ways to make sure that provides more equitable access. The last part is between April and December, we want to take a look at reevaluating the location for immersion. As we propose the swap, what we're seeing now with our changing data and with the upcoming the information that we're seeing, we want to make sure that when we select a spot, it is the right spot. So we need to open it up and make sure that when we're doing that, we're doing it in the right place. We know we're going to do something. We don't know necessarily what shape that's going to take right at the moment. I think that'll come clear as we move through the pathways piece. All of the pieces that you saw tonight will be posted next week on our enrollment and projections webpage with the methodology and details attached. And with that, I would take questions.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. That was a very, very meaty, information-filled presentation. So thank you all for pulling it together. I know you've been working on it for a long time. It's been almost a year, I guess, since you started digging into projections and refining the methodologies, and then, of course, the boundary changes in the fall, rolled into this. So my thanks, our thanks for all of this work on this presentation. And we've got a last section here that I think board members might want to ask questions about. Anybody want to start?
I would just like us to be as clear as possible, because I think we're saying something, but we're not saying something. And I think if you would like, Dr. Murphy, I can leave it to you, but I think what I'm hearing is that we are acknowledging how strong our immersion program is, and that we believe it is a very definite pathway that we want to grow. I heard the word crecer. We want to grow the program. It's a strong program for us. And that we will be looking at the locations, the best locations for the immersion program. And that the relationship of that to the swap is that that is something that is a piece of it and will be in consideration as a part of it, but that will become part of a larger conversation about where's the best location for these programs, and that consideration would be concluded by December.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear about that, because we get a lot of questions about this. So I think I said that, and I want to be able to repeat it correctly in the community.
Yes.
Do you have questions or comments on this last piece, the next steps piece?
I do. I just want to read the last bullet on page 21, because I think it's clear there and I would like to attempt to translate it in Spanish in case the immersion community is watching. But we are looking to reevaluate the location for immersion in preparation for the 2020 boundary process. As Ms. Van Doren said, April through December. I just want to reiterate what she said, but also read it directly from the bullet on the slide, which is page 21 of the PowerPoint. As you know, we've been getting a lot of lobbying on this from the community. They've been coming to board meetings. So I want to be clear that there are no decisions that have been made, and we're looking to reevaluate location for immersion in preparation for 2020 boundary process. Entonces, ahorita no hay decisiones que han sido determinados. Estamos me cuesta pronunciar esta palabra, entonces les pido disculpas, pero lo voy a buscar aquí. Reevaluar la decisión de mover inmersión a otra escuela. Es una reevaluación. No hay decisión, es reevaluar la locación de inmersión en preparación para el proceso de los nuevos límites o nuevas zonificaciones, dependiendo cómo lo dice, del el proceso que va a tomar, que va a ser hecho en el año 2020. Entonces, solo quiero aclarar eso para que las personas que estén viendo entiendan que es una reevaluación y no hay ninguna decisiones que han sido hechos. Okay. I just, and Ms. Van Doren, thank you for reiterating that. I just wanted to also just reemphasize it and then attempt to translate that in Spanish because it's important that we recognize the projections, the changes that are happening, and the evaluation that you mentioned. So thank you for all the work, and thank you for the update to Mr. Ruiz and Dr. Johnson, and to you, Ms. Stengel. A lot of work went into this, and I am so grateful for the information. We have a lot of things happening. And this was very helpful, and I appreciate the next step slide, very clear and very direct as to where we're going, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yes, so now that that last bullet point has been examined carefully regarding the immersion program, I think we need to, I don't remember my logic, look at the contrapositive or something of this, which is, what does it mean for science focus? It appears to mean that science focus is now one of 20 elementary schools, 18 elementary schools, where immersion might go. Is that the case? In other words, the swap is one of a number of possibilities for how immersion might change or evolve.
It's my understanding that there's going to be more detail on this coming forward.
Right. I think one of the things is that we've heard from the community that they wanted to have some type of engagement. Those details are forthcoming, but I think this time period of April through December allows for those conversations to happen, for folks to get a full awareness. I think Ms. Van Doren has struck on a point. And that's why I think it's so important this evening, and I want to just say thank you that Jessica Panfield from Claremont, as well as Marlene Perdomo from Key, are both here. They have been very involved in these conversations, and also so has some of the leadership in their community. I won't say comprehensively. And we have also been working very closely with the principal at Arlington Science Focus. So I think one of the things that we've heard loud and clear is there were different constituent groups that wanted voice. So with that as one piece of the backdrop, the new information that was shared this evening, I think it's really just healthy to reevaluate our overall position on this, give this a little bit more time. What does this mean not only for those two schools and the immersion program, but what does it mean for the entire complement of elementary schools? I wish I could give you in detail what all that spells out tonight, but I can't, because it's something that's evolving, and we're working with various groups to make that happen, and so more information will be really forthcoming. I do want to say that our immersion programs have been very, very successful. I think that's due in part to the leadership that we've had in those positions prior to the two individuals that I've mentioned. And Ms. Johnson has played a significant role at Claremont, as well as Dr. Marjorie Meyer, who was at Key. So I think how we look at the possibility of growing this program at the elementary level in the future is something that we really need to examine. I also think the programs are popular, and I also think they serve our students very, very well, and that's all of our students. So I think that's where we are tonight. Ms. Stingle, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've shared. And so be patient with us. We've got some new information on the board, and I think we just need to figure out what all that means.
Thank you. Done? Okay, I'm just going to summarize here. The projections have changed. Elementary growth is up. There's more information coming. Pre-K through grade 12 instructional program pathways will help us clarify what we need to make available programs equitably for all students. The evaluation of world language is underway and is collecting data on the immersion program. And we will reevaluate the location of the immersion program in relationship to the swap that had been proposed for Key and Science Focus. The decisions need to be completed by December so it can be considered as part of the 2020 boundary process. There will be community engagement. The format and the process for the process and the engagement is still taking shape, and there will be more detail on that coming forward relatively soon. Is that
Yes.
Is that an accurate summary?
That is
of where we
accurate.
are with this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I think we can move on. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank the rest of the staff for this. And we are at the action item stage, and we have one action item tonight related to the FY18 final fiscal status report. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, I will continue to belabor it, but I do want to go back on one point, and that is tonight, Dr. Cannon, was the first annual update that we've brought to the board. So I think we've got some lessons learned. This is something that I know we wanted to institute. I would agree it was a lot of information, probably in a 2-hour time period. So we will reflect on it about how we move forward in the future, and perhaps it commands its own work session. But this is the first time out of the box with it. That being said, let me turn to Ms. Leslie Peterson, who has our final fiscal status on CIP quarterly report. I think there's some new information that you'd like to share here this evening before the board takes action.
Yes, we have one small change from the last time that you saw this, which was actually December the 20th. We like to leave a meeting in between so that the BAC can weigh in if they have any comments or suggestions for you. When you saw it in December, we had $9.3 million worth of available funds, and we had recommended to use those in a specific way, and we had some input from the board, and we made one small change, and that is we are recommending putting just over $343,000 into the debt service reserve. That allows us to beef up the debt service reserve so that we have the 50% amount to offset next year's budget, and that helps us with next year's budget. So we've added that recommendation here for the reserves. We still have the same expenditure recommendations, just over $600,000 for things that we need in the current year. And then you can see here we are using all $9.3 million. What we did was we reduced the addition to the future budget year's reserve by that $343,000 and then put that money into the debt service reserve. So those are the changes. I can take questions or.
Thank you. Board members, do you have questions? Sorry, are there speakers?
We do have one speaker, Mr. Josh Hall.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Josh Fold, the Compensation Chair. On behalf of our members, I'd like to say I'm glad to see APS is pushing 90+% of our closeout from 18 into reserves. While I wish it was 100% going to the reserves, and I wishing more than 80% was going to the compensation, I'm glad to see the shift is towards future budget years. And we know money is going to be tight in the coming years, and again, I invite this board and the superintendent to reach out to AEA and allow to help with budget decisions, as we have eyes and ears in all areas of service to APS, and would be well suited to give feedback privately in advance of a budget proposal. As compensation chair, the least enjoyable part of my job, and I say this with all seriousness, is having to publicly call out cuts that are tone deaf when employees' livelihoods are on the line, cuts that could have been avoided if senior staff had only reached out to us in advance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Josh. And board members, do you have questions or comments on the presentation? None. Okay. So I guess we're ready to vote. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Y'all know I'm a little bit thorough. If you haven't figured out, I'm a little bit methodical, right? So I just want to point out that the motion states resolutions 1 through 5, but we haven't shown them. So I think we should show them before I move on the motion. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to summarize those?
Well, I'm happy to read them, or we can just flip
Just
through
read them. Go ahead.
Okay.
Just go through them.
I move that the school board adopt resolutions 1 through 5, as I will read them. That's my motion. So, Resolution 1, the school board requests the appropriation and increase in county transfer of $9,263,991 to the school operating fund, which represents a combination of budget savings from fiscal year 2018 in the amount of $10,840,499, less a decrease in local tax revenue from fiscal year 2018 in the amount of $1,576,508, which is below the amount anticipated and budgeted for in the fiscal year 2018 adopted school board budget. Resolution 2, the school board requests the reappropriation of encumbrances and budget increases in the fiscal year 2019 school budget as indicated below. School operating fund, $7,138,417. Capital projects fund, $25,261,470. Community activities fund, $110,289. And the food and nutrition services fund for $142,345. Resolution number 3, the school board requests the reappropriation of fiscal year, don't laugh at me. Wow. The school board requests a reappropriation in fiscal year 2019 of the balances in both the grants and restricted programs fund and the bond construction fund as follows. Grants and restricted programs fund, $4,338,159, and the bond construction fund, $124,133,145. Next resolution, the school board requests the carry forward of the following fund balance reserve in the school operating fund, $25,319,573, fiscal year 2019 adopted budget use of reserves. $9,495,442, future budget years reserves. $2,512,239 VRS reserve. $4,700,000 compensation reserve. $643,621 future debt service reserve. $2 million separation pay reserve, and $1 million health insurance reserve, self-insurance. In the food, is this a resolution as well?
It's a continuation of number 4.
Thank you. In the Food and Nutrition Services Fund, $4,264,528 with fund balance. And in the Capital Projects Fund, $42,383,778 with capital reserve. These reserves will be carried on the books of Arlington Public Schools until the school board authorizes the use of these reserve funds. And our final resolution, the school board authorizes the superintendent to use the amount appropriated from the county in resolution number 1 and carried over to fiscal year 2019 as follows. Addition to compensation reserve, $1,750,000. Addition to debt service reserve, $343,941. Addition to the future budget years reserve, $6,566,117. For uses in fiscal year 2019, $603,933. Total authorized uses of carryover funds is $9,263,991. And that is the motion I am making.
Second.
Thank you. No comments? No, we asked that already. No comments from the board? Okay, we're ready to vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank
Leslie.
you. Yeah.
And next, we will hear 3 information items, and the first is a proposed calendar for the 2020 school year. 2020. Yeah,
Good evening.
2021 school year. Dr. Murphy?
No,
it's... I'm sorry. The 1920 school year.
I'll turn to Ms. Erin Wells-Smith for this presentation, and I want to thank you and the committee that you worked with in bringing this evening's proposal forward.
Good evening. I want to thank the school board and Dr. Murphy for the opportunity to present the recommendation for the school calendar this evening. We also would like to thank the board for taking a look at this so early so that a decision can be made and families, students, and parents can make decisions based upon the recommendations that will be brought forward. I'd like to start this evening with the goals that we'll go through in the presentation. First, I'd like to outline the process. It's quite a extensive process. Take a look at the requirements and considerations that the calendar committee had to keep in mind, to discuss what 2 calendar options are being put forward, and then to share the superintendent's recommendation. This is a graphic of the calendar development process. The committee met in November. It's about 25 members, and we do that to make sure that all the different aspects of calendar can be considered as we move forward with the recommendations. It consists of parents, principals, staff from DTL, teachers, assistants, transportation was there, Kathy Klingenpeel to talk about semesters, transcripts, report card, and reps from the sites that have unique calendars. We come forward during that time to come up with the 2 calendar options, and those were developed for consideration. Once the calendar committee came up with those 2 options, then we basically went out on tour to make sure that we got feedback from employee groups, the advisory groups, and also from a survey that was online. Feedback was then presented based upon those, the information I just shared with the superintendent and the ELT team. And then here we are with tonight with the recommendation be presented to you for approval and adoption. I'd like to start with the calendar recommendations and considerations that the committee had to keep in mind. Again, we were looking for one district-wide or division calendar, keeping in mind that we do have some unique calendars within that division calendar. You can see that we've got Arlington Community High School, Langston, which have semester dates that we need to keep in mind, HB Woodlawn and Stratford because of their early release dates and the nature of those, Barcroft with the modified schedule, and then again the summer school. So lots to take into consideration when we're moving forward with the recommendations, hence why the committee is so large. We also have requirements that we need to keep in mind. Again, the code that states that the opening of the school year needs to meet those particular guidelines, and in Arlington that means that it has to be an after Labor Day start. We need to keep in mind the 181 days that need to be in the instructional calendar for students, and we need to make sure that we balance the alternative school schedules and semesters. Teachers have 194 contractual days, and then we need to keep in mind the recognized school board and religious holidays. So all things that we considered when coming forward this evening. We also take a look at what's going on in the surrounding school divisions around us. We work together with colleagues and with other schools to make sure that the breaks are consistent, which aligns parent and student schedules. So you can see we look at Alexandria Cities, Fairfax, Loudons, and Prince William. What we're bringing forth does meet that requirement as well. So here we go to the options. This graphic gives you a brief overview of what the differences are in these options. First and foremost, both options meet the requirements, which is very important. When you look at the first option, when it comes to the instruction, the big difference between these two calendars happens in October. The first calendar is continuous instruction. There is one holiday, one early release, and 2 parent-teacher conferences. That being said, October 14th, which is Columbus Day, is a professional learning day for staff and a student holiday. That really mimics what we did this school year. The second option has what we are considering a little bit more of an interrupted instruction, because if you look, you'll see that October 7th is a professional learning day, with October 14th being a Columbus Day holiday. So the 3 weeks in October, the 3 full weeks, have interruptions based upon 2 holidays, 1 early release, and 2 parent-teacher conferences. The committee came forward with that recommendation, but there were some concerns and a lot of discussions about continuous instruction for students. The last bullet on both shows the difference for our 12-month employees. Those are the employees that have to work 260 calendar days. Therefore, in the first option, they would have to work December 26th as a holiday. They will have December 26th as a holiday in lieu of the October 14th student holiday. In the second scenario, they will report on December 26th in lieu of the October 14th holiday. So for our 12-month employees, that would be a big distinction between the 2 calendars. Feedback. If you take a look at the feedback here on the graph, the calendar 1 is the first one listed, with calendar 2 being the second one listed. As you take a look, they both have comparable ratings, but you can see that the approvals were weighted differently based upon group. So if you look at calendar 1, you can see in that first graphic that it was favored by parents. You can see that there's a 78% approval rating between they liked it, they could live with it. Secondly, you can see in that same calendar that staff was kind of split. You can see 50%, 53% liked it or could live with it. 47% were saying they did not like it. Students, you can see there for the third bar in that graph, you can see that 68% did not like it, with 32% saying they could like it or live with it. And then the community is in that last graph, with 59% saying they weren't sure that they did not like it, with 41% saying they liked it or could live with it. You can see that when you look at the second calendar, the feelings were a little bit different. In the first one, staff reported that, the parents reported that this was not probably their more favorable option. You can see 57% said we could like it and live with it, but we have 42% saying that they would not. This was a favorite, as you can see, amongst staff and students. And you can see that with the community members, there was a 79% approval rating. So again, comparable, both, with differing groups liking them for various reasons that I'll discuss a little bit further along. We did want to come back and share a little bit about what the survey results said as far as the narrative online. There was a strong sentiment for teachers that they would be willing to participate in the 7 in-service days. Lots of conversation around that. They felt like if they were relevant and they were given ample time in their classrooms, that option would work, and that's that calendar 1 option. Teachers and parents did express that they would like consideration for school days off, not related to religious holidays, and they cited that those would really be around the whole spring break. and that is there other religious holidays that we would be willing or could recognize in the calendar. I'm now moving forward to the superintendent's recommendations. The recommendation is for the division for would be for calendar 1. And that is because there's more consistency of instruction for students in the fall, particularly those October dates that we discussed, and that's foundational for student achievement. There was positive feedback from this calendar because it mimics calendar 1, and that's what we have gone through this school year, and folks felt like that calendar worked for the most part, keeping in mind professional learning needed to be relevant and they needed time in their classroom. This gets a little bit more specific about the recommendations. You can see that this calendar has a start date for staff of August 22nd, for students of the 3rd of September. The end date would be the 19th of June, and then you can see when the students' last dates are there for elementary, middle, and high. Winter break is listed as the 23rd through the 1st. And staff and students for spring break would be April 6th through April 10th. The Barcroft schedule is listed there as well, as is the summer school schedule. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there speakers?
We have one speaker, Mr. Fold.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Josh Fold, Chair of the AEA Compensation Committee. I'd like to offer a few comments on the calendar as they relate to professional development, staff morale, and compensation. It was said in the presentations that teachers liked the 7 days of pre-service provided that professional development offered during these days was engaging. While I agree that employees like engaging professional development, nobody wants to sit through boring or repetitive presentations. It would appear that APS is conflating statements. The question is not asked, would one rather take the same professional development in 5 days of pre-service versus 7, or if the professional development were offered flexibly throughout the year at one's own pace, would that be preferred? To be sure, after AEA offered a flexible professional development plan, we called it the APEX model, and would be happy to present it again, Arlington embarked on a reformation of its professional development system, but there is still much work to be done. Why is this a compensation issue? For parents of young children, that is your staff, those 2 extra days in August are some of the most expensive to find childcare for something that could be done flexibly, i.e. online or in other alternative methods, if the will could only be found to do so. Childcare is already difficult in this region, and APS is making it worse. While I have my doubts that this burden will be corrected during this calendar discussion, it is my hope that it will be considered going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Josh. Board members, do you have questions or comments on the presentation?
Yeah, I do.
Tanya?
I had a couple of questions. I had a question, I didn't write it down, so hopefully I'll remember. But the other question I had was, I noticed that the difference between both calendars mainly in the month of October. Oh, I just remember the question. Is the pre-service date time the same for both calendars?
The pre-service date time is the same in both calendars, and there is a lot of discussion around, but it's not a difference between the two. It's something that they're asking us to take a look at as far as the numbers of days being spent in professional learning prior to the beginning of the school year.
Okay.
So it's more a conversation about that versus one calendar and another.
Is that discussion still being had?
It is still being had. However, the committee did come forth with recommendations to keep it as is, but there is discussions about what that needs to look like and how it could be relevant and
Okay.
also meet the needs of the staff.
Okay, so I did note that the biggest difference was the month of October, and I noted that in calendar, I believe it's calendar option 2, we give Columbus Day off to both students and staff. But in option 1, Columbus Day, and then you have the Professional Learning Day on October 7th. And then in option, I'm not going to say the options because it might be confusing, but in the other calendar, Columbus Day is actually a Professional Learning Day.
Correct.
And the students have it off.
Correct.
And what we did is we gave that holiday to the 12th-month staff in December, on December 26th in that calendar, where the Columbus Day was an actual Professional Learning Day. So we swapped the holiday.
The 12-month calendar, the difference in the 12-month calendar is based upon the 260. And so, yes, by swapping those, that is the difference between those employees and the days they would need to work.
So my question is, it appears then that in one calendar, the 10-month employees and the students have one less day off. And the calculation is that on October 7th, which is a Professional Learning Day, in that calendar, the students have off, and then they have off again for Columbus Day. In the other calendar, the students have off only on Columbus Day, and the teachers have to work that day. But there is no place where we add that extra holiday, which I imagine is the reason that the students and staff preferred that interrupted October calendar, and the parents did not.
When the results came
Right.
back, yes.
And thank you, Mr. Goldstein, but the 26th is already during winter break, so staff is already, the 10-month employees already have that day off. Right. And so in one calendar, the 10-month employees and the students have an extra day.
Correct.
So is there a reason that we did not move that extra day, add another extra day?
That was not a recommendation that came out of the
Okay.
committee. As I said, the committee really, there was a strong feeling towards that calendar 1 option, and more of the conversation was around continuity.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you for answering that question.
Okay.
So then, just to reiterate, does this mean that students are attending an extra day of school in calendar 1?
No.
So can you tell me where they get that day off later? Because I didn't see that.
So the students in calendar 1 and the students in calendar 2, there's no difference between the amount of days that they're attending.
It doesn't.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes, but it doesn't appear that way in the analysis that I did, and I think Dr. Cannon
Okay.
is agreeing, so you may want to look at that.
Okay, so let us go back and take a look at
And-
that to see.
Yes, because
Okay, we
that
can
was
do
a
that.
question.
Okay.
Right? And I think, and then, as I mentioned earlier, I attended the Capitol Conference, and one of the bills they're proposing in the school safety bill is, it's a Senate bill that it would actually prohibit school boards from requiring students to attend school on Election Day.
Right.
And also prohibit parent-teacher conferences and meetings on Election Day.
Correct.
And we currently, under both calendar options, have that day as a Professional Learning Day, which allows us to meet the first condition of this bill if it passes, but it might not allow us to meet the second condition regarding meetings for teachers. And so my question is, I don't know how we've done this, I don't know, Dr. Murphy, if you know the answer, but if this legislation passes, do we have to apply it in 2019, 2020 after we've adopted our school calendar?
The way that it's worded now, we would. And
Okay,
so
so we'd have to modify it.
So what we would do, and what we've started to discuss, is could we do an off-site Professional Learning Day for staff that would take them out of the building? The only challenge is Barcroft, and so we would need to go back and look a little bit more carefully at their calendar, because in that scenario, students would be present on that.
Well, if it turns out that Dr. Cannon and I are right in our analysis and they are going one extra day in calendar 1, I have a suggestion. So we can have the day before Election Day be Professional Learning, and Election Day be the day off for everybody, both staff and students. Right, but Monday is, you go to school. But this would not do that interruption in October, and it would then even it out. and Dr. Cannon, who also analyzes things like this, please verify if that's correct. But if you did that in the calendar where October 15th, the Columbus Day is the professional learning day, you leave October alone, and then you add that day that we think is missing as that Monday is an option, and then we would meet the bill requirements if it passes, which the VSBA attorney, the people who lobby say there was a high chance of that passing. The school safety bills that are being presented are very, I guess, popular, for lack of a better word. And they expect a lot of those bills to pass, this being one because they believe that it would be safer for the school system. So that's feedback.
I appreciate that feedback. Would you two like to participate on our committee by any chance? Because we like that creative thinking.
I will happily volunteer if I have the time.
So we appreciate that suggestion because we are feeling that there is a good chance that this may move forward, and if so, we need to move very quickly because we are looking at a November date.
But if there is another extra, if there, it looked to me like one calendar had an extra day of attendance for students. So that might resolve that. So those are my questions, and thank you for clarifying if we would have to comply starting school year 2019, and I'm grateful that you're already looking at what an alternative would be.
We are.
Okay, thank you.
Shall I follow up? Yeah, if I could follow up on that. Yeah, to be clear, what Tanya said, in option 2, students have both October 7th and the 14th off. In option 1, students have October 14th off. So they have an extra day off.
And we need to go back.
And there's no compensating
we need
day
to go
off
back
in
and
the
take
other.
a look at
So
that.
yes, if your intention was to have the same number of instructional days in both, yeah, it would be interesting to see how that works out. Because, and then my one comment is a little bit different than what Tanya suggested. One of the reasons I like option 2, and I think students and teachers liked option 2, is not only, everyone wants an extra day off, which is how it looks, but people want days off kind of, regularly. So what happens in your recommended option, option 1, let's see, students get October 14th off, but it's a professional learning day for teachers. So teachers do not have a day off until November 11th. And that's kind of where you get started and you go, wow, there's like 2 full months with no day off. So that's, I think there's that too, that.
Could have election day off.
Well, that's still November. I mean, you're starting, and so some good things, and again, this has to do with just dates. We have a very early start because Labor Day happens to be September 2nd. That's really great. We have 2 full weeks at winter break. One thing I learned, fun fact, after this winter break, high school parents and high school students love the 2-week block, but elementary parents go a little stir crazy. Just, you might want to break up the parents
We
into
heard
those
from parents about that, definitely.
But
That
it's
was
elementary
one of
parents.
It was elementary parents.
Yeah, everyone else seems to really like the 2-week block, so that may be when you take surveys, you might want to divide into those 2 groups. Just want to point out, even though it's not part of this calendar, there was a lot of praise for what Yorktown does with these breaks and has a no homework policy. I really hope that we can spread that word. Whole child advocates were very happy with that approach, just something to think about. And yeah, I think that's it. So I guess it sounds like we're going to get a follow-up.
I think we'll go back and take
Okay.
a look at that and come back to you with a follow-up, definitely.
All right, great. Oh, I wanted to ask about, I didn't fully understand your answer to Tanya's question about the pre-service days.
So if you take a look at the option 1 with the pre-service days, so you can see that the professional learning in option 1, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the same amount as there are in both. So really, the difference between the 2, there isn't. It's the same amount of days.
Professional.
Is that what the
Oh,
professional
that's all you were
learning-
saying. Okay, I
That's
thought
all
you
I was
were-
saying.
okay.
But there is
Right.
further discussion, as we're hearing here tonight, about how those days should be utilized.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I wanted to
And if there
mention,
should-
and that's not really going to be affected by our vote on the calendar.
Correct.
You can always work on how to do those days, and, but
So
that's
the
not.
recommendation would be from the group that they are comfortable with the amount of days for this particular calendar if they meet the criteria of being relevant and given ample time in the classroom. However, there is discussion about going forward. Would we consider with that same amount of professional learning days, or would there be consideration to lessen that to 5 or something smaller than that?
And can I just add one more, this is just a comment and clarification. The reason. One of the reasons that it is important to work with the surrounding counties for their calendars is not just the scheduling of sports and stuff, but because we're small, we have a lot of teachers who live in these counties. Correct? And so it's very hard for them to come to work if their children have spring break. So it's a consideration that the counties do with each other. I know that other districts do this around Virginia, but I don't know if people were aware of that it really is a benefit to not only a scheduling for the schools and things like that on activities, but for the benefit of the teachers who don't live in Arlington that generally live in the surrounding districts.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. This will be coming back for action at the next meeting, the 7th? Okay, looking forward to that. And next, we will hear the contract award for construction manager advisor services for the new elementary school at Reed. Dr. Murphy?
All right, we're going to turn to Mr. Chambers, and actually, he has the next 2 items for construction manager advisor services. And if you could do the new elementary school first at Reed, and then we'll take questions, and then you could move right into the Ed Center.
Okay. Happy to be here to present to you. As the process moves on for the Reed project, it's time for us to bring the construction manager at risk on board, which the services are required to complete the project, and this is a construction manager advisor. They assist us during the value engineering as we go through it and into construction and are full-time on site during the construction process. We have solicited proposals from 2 firms that are currently under the term contract. Both firms did submit a proposal. Through evaluation, we considered price as well as qualifications of personnel as well as and the firms. We did reach a consensus on a recommendation, and school board is required because the contracted value exceeds the $500,000. So for the Reed project, we are recommending to approve the contract award for the CMA services to CBR Erie Incorporated in the amount of $1,265,699. And the award is incorporated into current funding available and by the school board, so no increase in funding is required. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Are we moving right into, this is going to come back to the board on the 7th?
Correct.
And this could potentially be a consent item?
That is correct.
If we don't hear any
Comments? Yep.
yeah, controversy about it in the meantime. And the final information item is the contract award for construction manager advisor services for the Ed Center reuse project.
Right. Okay. This is parallel to the previous one, so go right ahead, Mr. Chambers.
Okay. Do we have it up yet?
Did you hit button? There you go.
Oh, here we go. Okay, and again, we've gotten to the point where we're looking for the CMA for the Ed Center renovation. And we went through the same process for this, looking at the proposals. And again, the award will exceed the $500,000, so we have to bring it to the school board. But we did the same evaluation and looked at the firms and the personnel presented for the project, and we are recommending to approve the contract award for CMA service to MBP Incorporated in the amount of $582,695, and the award is incorporated in the current funding available, approved by the school board, so no additional funding is necessary. Any questions? Okay.
Questions, board members? Questions? No? Okay. Similarly, we will be seeing this on February 7th.
Correct.
Possibly in the consent agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're now at the new business section of the meeting. Board members, do you have any new business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.